Okay, I guess I hit the button.
All right. We're recording too?
Yeah.
That's automatic. Oh, there we go. All right. It is 6:07 and I will call the Newcastle Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. We'll start with any amendments to the agenda. I have one, and that's we brought Brian Foote, our former compatriot, to come back and talk to us about some technology stuff with Zoom room or some sort of something in the community room whenever this craziness ends. And so we'll put that up. I guess we'll put that up. Well, we'll do minutes. Minutes are going to be quick, so we'll put that. We're gonna change that to we're gonna call that new business. We're gonna change that to 4.1, and we'll quickly just run through the minutes because I know Brian, I know you missed running through the minutes.
Right,
So
I do.
I didn't want to kick you out without doing the minutes. All right, so. So we have the minutes to review. Did anyone see anything popped out of them?
It looked good.
All right. All in favor of, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion.
Rob, second. Tor, all in favor? Passes 4-0. All right. So we'll move on to the new 4.1. This is going to screw me up all night. New 4.1 Zoom room, community room, and I have some technology I wanted to show Brian and see if it worked. So I ordered some stuff off Amazon, and I think it's gonna work. But this is like a show and tell.
You didn't use my credit card, did you?
I did.
We still have that somewhere, I think. Probably had to buy a few things back in the day.
Right.
So I don't know if this will work, but I thought that this might help.
Oh, that's nice.
So the real reason we brought Brian in here is we have a long-standing tradition of getting something for the selectmen when they part ways, and it was a little bit hard to figure out what to get for Brian because he was selling everything he owned, and I think some of the stuff that I owned, because people were showing up and Brian posted this on Facebook Marketplace. So he didn't need a sign saying that he had an address because he doesn't have an address anymore.
No.
He didn't need a painting because it would just fall off on the ride. But we did get you. I mean, this is actually
nice.
This is actually an address right here. I mean, this is showing that you know where you're from. So wherever you go and you pull out, you want to have a couple cold ones if the fridge isn't big enough.
Right.
Or you can have this up in the truck. You know, you can pack your lunch, put that in the truck. You're all set to go. You can keep cruising.
I love that.
And,
That's nice. I love the new
when you're sitting around the campfire. Hold on, I'll be right back. So it's not very often that we do something for the partner of the former select person as well. Well, we got you two nice Yeti tumblers, and again, this is just to make you remember where you're from, and
right.
and not to stray too far or too long. So, a couple tumblers.
Nice. Wow, I'm all Yeti'd up now.
Hot or cold, whatever you want to do.
Right.
I'm just saying. And, pick them up whenever. I'll be using them. I might lose one of these. I mean, it's just, I got to try it out to make sure it still works.
Right. Make sure when I pick them up, Joel, they're going to be full.
You don't want a faulty one. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
Right.
And we gotta see how long the ice lasts in this.
Right, exactly.
And,
so am I picking those up at your house and they're gonna be full when I get there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Jack and Coke or
and so And so, yeah, so Brian did figure it out, I think, before he knew that he was coming in to get some gifties, and he wasn't actually going to be talking about Zoom rooms because he's been here long enough. But do have one more thing. John, do you want to take it away?
Yeah. So first of all, this is always a fun time of year because we get to recognize selectmen who've done a lot, and certainly, if anyone wants to blame me for being in Newcastle, Brian Foote stands probably at the top of the list for people who deserve that
Put that all
blame.
on me, yeah.
So I'm glad he's running out of town now that 5 years is coming up. So that's really nice of him to do. Basically, Joel's the last one left, and he hasn't figured out enough not to leave either. But no. So this is also it's a fun time of year for the board and all that. But there's one more thing there's more because it's fun to do this sort of thing. Obviously we had the honor and privilege to the town and working with the fire department to name the fire station after Clayton Huntley, obviously Brian's long-term neighbor and pal and all that. So we're in that habit of naming things after people. And so I want to show everyone on the screen right now the 269th annual town report is dedicated to Brian Foote. The Board of Selectmen, in typical clandestine fashion, came to this decision unanimously. I want to also offer a tip of the cap to Brian's longtime colleague on the board, Mr. Ben Fry, and his far too talented to be married to Ben and very talented person for helping to help wordsmith this with and make this happen. I also want to take note that Joel is just cut out of the frame of the photo that Shelley edited. So Joel missed out on being named. This was from one of the infamous Sherman Marsh meetings with DOT, thanks to Maya. I want to read it for everybody if I can. This is the 269th annual report of the town of Newcastle is dedicated to Brian S. Foote. Brian didn't have the honor of being born in Newcastle, but he had the good sense to move here in the 1980s, living for a few years near Cowshit Corner, then on East Old County Road. Brian and his family found a home in Newcastle that suited them well. Many in the community came to know Brian as a small business owner in Damariscotta or from his time at Miles Memorial Hospital, but less well known were the countless hours Brian gave to the town of Newcastle over the years. Nearly from the moment Brian arrived in town, he began volunteering. He joined the Newcastle Fire Department and was an active member for many years. Later, Brian became involved in the town's finance committee in the 2000s, which ultimately inspired him to run for the Board of Selectmen in 2009. Since then, and until this past January, Brian Foote served on the board with the vast majority of that time as the board's chairman. Brian served as a selectman so long that he saw 4 town administrators come and go. Well, one's still here. While it is impossible to condense, well, I'm not an administrator anymore, just a glorified secretary. That's my own little editorial comment for Brian. While it's impossible to condense his entire town career here, just a few of the things Brian did were: he built, advocated for, and then witnessed the rise and fall of the bold Joint Public Works Department initiative. He worked for years on projects such as the Comprehensive Plan and New Code. He helped establish a robust road reconstruction and maintenance plan to address years of deferred road maintenance, helped transition to the town manager form of government, worked to establish numerous programs to build efficiency and raise transparency within our town government, painstakingly rebuilt the fund balance over the course of years from virtually nothing to nearly $2 million, and amazingly managed to hold the property tax mill rate flat for the last 5 years. Through it all, Brian went above and beyond to answer the call of public service, whether it was to help out in the town office with a computer issue, regularly sit through 3 to 4 hour meetings, often several times a week, meet with state agencies, or answer questions from concerned residents with respect and an open mind. Brian tackled the position of selectman with a level of professionalism and hard work rarely seen, and he will be sorely missed. As the saying goes, though not often achieved, Brian certainly left it better than he found it. We wish Brian and Bertha well on their cross-country adventure. Have fun, but come home soon.
That's
So,
very
Brian, there you are. Surprise!
Right, yes, that is shocking. Thought it would have gone Clayt this year.
Yeah.
But thank you. That's very nice. I appreciate that.
And I do think your lovely wife gets kudos too for you having you be away for all of those hours and all that time. So she'll get to enjoy you now all the time. I'm
Oh yeah,
interested to
she's
see
looking
how
forward
that
to
goes.
that. She's looking forward to that. Me 24/7, 365.
That's why Bertha got her own mug, so she can deal with you for that amount of time. So
I'm gonna enjoy him every day.
And Brian, to that point, I do want to mention we usually hand the cover we hand the copy of the report to the person who's that is dedicated to the report to whom we are dedicating the report to. Of course, it's a little early for us to do that. We're still 6 weeks, a month, 2 months away from doing that. But what I do want to right now is share with the cover of the 2021 annual town report. I can't think of a better possible cover personally. And I think it's pretty fitting that this is in there. This is the cover and the dedication, and we'll also mention Clayt on the inside and in the memoriam. I remember you had said that we try to spread those things out, and this has been. I think it's going to be a really great photo for everyone to see, and I think it's. I can't think of two people who've done a lot more for Newcastle in certainly in the recent past than you and Clayt. So this is it's a special book this year, I do believe.
It is. It's nice. It's great to share it with Clayt.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that, guys. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate all you've done.
It's well deserved.
And I just appreciate we got you.
You got me with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were crowing about how much you were able to pull over on others in past years, Brian, I'm thinking, gosh, I hope he doesn't have a clue about this one. So I'm excited that you had no clue.
I figured I was going to get an address sign with my old address on it.
And where are you going to put it? On the back of the
rig, right?
Oh, see, okay, well there you go.
No. No, that's very nice. And the dedication, like I couldn't,
I want to thank Mark and Tara were ones who put that together for us. So thanks to Mark and Tara for making that gift happen. So yeah.
Yep, very nice. Thank you.
Cool.
Much appreciated. I do miss you guys. I miss dealing with the town a little.
Stick around. We're going through budget tonight, Brian.
Oh, what? Oh, budget? Oh, I have to
Yeah,
go.
stick around. You're welcome.
No. Yeah, I know, because we leave Saturday afternoon. We're heading out for Wells. So
Where are you headed?
Wells, we're going a little farther south. I heard it's warmer down south.
Yeah, there you go. Spring moves, what is it, 30 miles a day or something like that? So you'll get it before us.
Right, yeah. As long as it doesn't snow, we're good.
Yeah.
Does this mean I have to come to town meeting to get my book?
We'll find a way to get it to you. We'll send a carrier pigeon with it or something.
Well, we might only be in Leeds in June, so it won't be far away.
There you go.
Maybe,
You roll
or we'll be at Yellowstone. It's one or the other. I'm not sure yet.
It
I'm
might
not going to
still be
Yellowstone.
snowing in Yellowstone in June. Just beware.
It might be.
Tell Wanda we plan on going to Alaska for like 3 months.
Right.
You wait a couple years, we'll go with you.
All right, that sounds great.
Or you can do it again.
We can do it again. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
And then
Lost for words.
the real
Unusual.
treat is we're not going to make you work tonight, Brian.
Right. That's the best part.
The best part. So,
No. Well, I should let you guys get back to work. You got some real work to do.
we got a long one tonight.
Well, I'll keep the budget down. You should hold the mill rate for another 3 years.
So I get to say, the first year I was chair, I dropped the mill rate.
Right, right.
I don't know if all,
We done?
I guess we're all done for
Move to
tonight.
adjourn?
It's just calling a night. That was a lot of fun. I got a Yeti cooler to play with. So yeah. So now moving on to revised 4.2.
He's here too.
Jesse.
And
Okay.
I hate to be a downer after all that fun and talk about the budget, the school budget. But John, I had sent, or Josh had sent the secondary budget and some student numbers.
I just got that this afternoon. I can bring that up for you. Yep.
I guess
Which
it
one
would
did-
be just to put it
which-
up.
Okay, which one do you want to show? The budget or the
Probably
information?
just the budget.
Okay,
Just
great.
it'll give me talking points so I can go through it.
All right.
We can go through. So this is just a friendly visit. We thought that we would, we probably should, as a Newcastle School Committee, touch base with the selectmen at least once a year. And we thought, well, we'll just talk about the budget and just maybe some little issues that we have and just connect that way. Oh boy, I can't see that at all, but that's okay because I have notes. So we put together our FY22 budget. Thank you. That's great.
Great.
And we just approved this budget at our last meeting. And you can see that it has gone up 11%. And because we have school choice, the school committee has very little input into the secondary budget. It's really just numbers. So this year we have something like 15 additional students projected for next year. I guess all the kids, families moving into town. So this is
Stephanie,
the result.
Steph, it's probably worth pointing out that that's the highest number you've seen in your
Yes,
9 years of service.
yes.
It's a considerable uptake in new students. There's also a fairly large freshman class compared to the outgoing senior class.
Mhm.
It's about a 60% swing. So that's where you see it in the secondary. And then just generally, as you all know, every house that goes on the market in this town sells. So we have quite an influx of families, which is exciting,
Mhm.
but it definitely indicates growth in the budget.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Steph.
Sure. So the other thing I just wanted to point out with the revenue here is that we have been getting, our state subsidy has been increasing pretty significantly over the last few years. And that's because Newcastle's just been on the edge of the mill rate. So our mill rate has just been teetering on the edge where we get subsidy or we don't. For years we didn't, we just got minimum. And so I don't know what that's going to mean for, reevaluating the houses. If our mill rate goes down, then next year we may get a hit with state subsidy, but I'm just warning you on that. This year we did get $85,000 more, so that's helpful. And another thing I wanted to point out is you won't see it on this budget, but we decided as a school committee to put just a modest amount away as a special ed contingency. So we used part of our beginning fund balance. We had, I think it's $20,000 we decided on to put as a special ed contingency, and we'll try to grow that a little bit every year so that if we do, this year we had a bit of a scare. We thought we may have like an out of district placement and we didn't, but we did decide that that would be a prudent thing to do. So we are working on that. And again, we don't have to go through the budget line by line, but basically the reason the budget's up is because of more students. Let me just see. Okay. I don't know if there's anything else in there. Special education costs, something just to show you. John, if you could turn to the next page
You
or
got it.
scroll. So right now, oops. Actually,
Sorry. My
uh,
mouse is a little sensitive.
okay,
Regular
great.
instruction or
Well,
instruction?
special ed. The regular instruction is just extra students. Special
Yeah.
ed,
I think it's down here.
right, no,
right?
you had it.
Oh, I was doing
You
so
were in the
good.
right place,
Sorry.
right
There
there.
we go.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
So that's special education on the second half. And just to let you know, most, all of our special ed students are now attending Lincoln Academy. And Lincoln Academy charges the town $11,500 per special ed student on top of the tuition. And I mean, that's one of the issues that we have been talking to Lincoln Academy about, because if a student has an IEP, we get charged a special ed fee or tuition of $11,000. On top of that, if a student needs an ed tech, the town pays for that. On top of that, if a student needs occupational therapy, physical therapy, psych services, speech services, the town gets billed. So we're sort of a pass-through for that. And Craig has asked Lincoln Academy about that, and we don't have a very good answer besides that we can charge that, so we are charging that. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that. We also belong to the SHREP program, which is sort of a little bit of an insurance program. That's the Sheepscot Regional Educational Program, and that's housed in Wiscasset. And it's something we joined about 4 years ago, and we pay into it every year. But if we did have a student that needed maybe an out-of-district placement, we could most likely send them to the SHREP program, and it would be a huge savings for the town. So we do contribute every year to that program. We do not have a student there right now, but this is sort of our insurance. Anything else I'm missing on that, Jesse? No?
I think that's right. Generally speaking, just for transparency's sake, it's most of this increase is due to headcount. It's just
Yeah.
due to more students.
Right.
So I think that's really important for everybody to realize and note. We have, obviously the two of us and Josh are all on the GSB board. We've worked that budget as well. The increases there are mainly due to headcount. So it's just a lot more students than we have typically had.
Mhm.
In fact, some of the articles have actually gone down, or some have had trade-offs. So I think we've done a pretty good job at just, when someone's just looking at the hard numbers, it's good to really refer to that. It's really just more students. So this is really the purest form of obligation. Yeah, it is. I think that's going to be a little ongoing with the AOS and with Craig looking at the LA, the Lincoln Academy relationships around the secondary budget elements. So I would like to say we'd have some information to share at some point. We're just going to have to keep on that.
Mhm. Yeah. One thing we always do, like I said, we don't have much choice in putting together this secondary budget, but we do always, or we have for the last few years, budgeted for contingency, because it's very easy that 4 new students come into town. I mean, some come in, some go out, but we always have budgeted for contingency, and that seems to be a good number for us. So that's in the budget. And then I think the very last page, there might be one other item to notice. Okay. The assessment down at under administration, there's the assessment for superintendent and I think they're fiscal services. And you'll see they've gone up 20%. And that's not, those budgets haven't gone up 20%. It's just that Newcastle's share has gone up because we have more students. So those budgets get divided per student. And because our student count went up so high, our share is greater, and that just happens to be the number for that. And our last item is transportation. And this is, for the last few years, we've been talking about this because that's one bus for $68,000. And I think this year we have 16 students riding the bus. So that's a very low number, mostly probably because Newcastle's so close to Lincoln Academy. And to note that we only provide transportation to Lincoln Academy. We have about 10 students that go to other schools, but we don't provide transportation to them. We have talked in the past about not providing transportation, but I think that we would want the town's buy-in on that, or that to be a wider discussion. I know Jefferson decided they were not going to provide transportation, and Lincoln Academy sends a bus there and they pay for the students there. But I think Craig asked Lincoln Academy about that and they said no. So, but that's something just to consider. So I think that's all the little nitty gritty of the budget. Nobody's laughing. What happened to this meeting?
I did notice that there was a lot of laughter before we started talking, and I was thinking how different that is from our meetings. And now this is more like our meetings.
Yeah, this is very serious, but
Yeah.
so anyway, I just wanted to share that, all those pieces. And if you ever have questions, please reach out. There is one issue that we just talked about. We talked about the head count being really important. And one of the things that we've struggled with is establishing residency. Like, it's every year, I mean, every month we do get a list of the students that attend Lincoln Academy. And it's only by chance that we sometimes find that someone isn't, that student doesn't belong to Newcastle. They've moved. Someone in the office notices, or one of the board members notices. And I think we could use help from the town. We would actually like to give the town that responsibility to determine residency. So I know Linda provides the list that comes from Lincoln Academy. And I know Lincoln Academy is looking at that as well, because they do every month. You'll see, they'll say student moved out of the area or student moved into the area. So they do adjust that. But it would be great to really have a set of eyes on that, because that's important. Anything else on that front? I know Craig couldn't be here because he has another meeting, but a few things that we've directed Craig to look into regarding Lincoln Academy is, again, and you've heard this before, that there is a pretty big financial impact for the town of Newcastle to educate students of dorm parents who live at Lincoln Academy. So I think this year we have 2 secondary students who live on campus who are children of dorm parents. And, Lincoln Academy charges us for those 2 students, as well as I don't know if the count is something like 6 K-8 students at GSB. And we pay a share of that as well. Of the GSB budget is split between the towns on head count. So Craig has talked to them about that, has talked to Lincoln Academy about homeschoolers because we have choice. It seems like a number of homeschoolers have decided to take courses at Lincoln Academy. And we're not all that, we're not seeing eye to eye on the fees that we're getting charged.
And
you know.
that's very much kind of in flight. We're trying to land at even understanding the billing model for that. We have effectively any number of homeschool students that can take one or more courses as supplemental to their homeschooling. And the billing amounts don't seem to align with our expectations. So that, yeah, that I think that's actually about all we have right now because the numbers are so different that Craig is looking into that too.
Do we get charged for like sports, things like that? If a homeschooler
Yep.
wants to participate in a sport, that's charged
Yep.
as well.
That's
We-
different though. It's not an academic class. So believe instruments like band is charged as a special thing. Sports are charged as their own thing. Cheerleading, those all have fees associated them with uniforms, building use fees, that type of stuff. So those are typically in the low hundreds of dollars. Isn't that right?
I just have to we have it.
Yeah.
It's been a student that's been taking cheerleading and it costs the town $1,600. So it's $1,300 that they're charging us as if they're taking a class and then a $300 registration fee.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
the $300 makes sense to us. The tuition attached to that does not.
Does not make sense to us, right?
And then for anything else is basically foreign language or a supplemental class. It's basically a full tuition bill for the period of time rather than a fraction of a full period. So for example, if it's a 1 trimester class, we'd like to see it be a fraction of the trimester charge. And it ends up being what looks like a trimester charge. So we're trying to figure that out.
Mhm.
And again, this without rankling any feathers, I think that it again has been well, we can charge this, so we're charging it. So yeah, it's something that we're looking at, or that Craig is looking at for us.
And not getting very far, I have to say.
Yep.
And I don't know what what we're going to end up doing, but that's where we are. So I think that's all we have for secondary, but I think Jesse, you should talk about GSB now a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, so actually just hi, I'm Jesse. I think I only know John, so hello. So I am new to the Newcastle School Committee this past calendar year. And I, through Stephanie's request, I have become the GSB CSD board chair. So I come to this role with a little bit of experience on other school boards. So I'm happy to be here. We do intend for, especially around the GSB activity, to possibly come as frequently as you'd like, maybe every few months, to sort of update you and fill you in on things. I know it's hard to fit things into agendas, but it might be nice for the town just to hear it from your school committee. All 3 of your school committee members sit on the GSB board. So let me see. So we've just finished our budget season, which went. We did a bit of a different process, but it's gone pretty well. So we're just coming into, or we haven't finished the season yet. We've finished all of the prep work. So we're coming into our business meeting Wednesday with the intent of approving and adopting that budget. As far as the school goes, the COVID response has been as good as anybody could expect. I'm sure you've been following the news, and various schools have had different successes. We have had some cases. Obviously, Lincoln Academy is dealing with some cases right now. GSB has had some. It's important for people to know, if they're not following the details. The cases that we've had, sometimes we have multiple at the same time. We recently had 3 at the same time, which the CDC qualifies as an outbreak. We have yet to determine, with the CDC's help, that any of the transmission happened in the school. So we're pretty confident that even with, going back to 5 days, I think the safety precautions, the guidelines that are in place are keeping everybody safe, at least from transmission in the school. So we have a few things that are coming back online for the students. So we're looking at a baseball softball season, which is scoped down in nature and just between other AOS schools. We're also looking at reintroducing woodwind instruction. One of the things to really keep in mind is you hear stories about seniors missing their proms and not being able to graduate, and this has really affected a lot of kids. When we think about the school, if you think about individual students, 7th graders who have been playing saxophone for 3 years, this is their 8th grade year, and they haven't been able to do anything. So it's good that we can try and finish the year with a little bit of normalcy. But all of that, anything you're going to hear about is all being done with CDC guidance, and there's a lot of research has gone into it, and just trying to keep people as safe as they possibly can be. Is there anything that anybody's interested in? I mean, I could probably just talk for another 15 minutes, but.
Great.
Okay.
It's nice to get the insight into the school budget, because it is one of the biggest lines. It's one of the things that we as the select board can't really do anything about, but it's good to hear that you guys are looking into keeping an eye on things and seeing where we can potentially make the costs come into some reasonable fashion. And again, if there's anything that that the board can do, or I always like volunteering John for things. If there's anything John can do, just I'll give you a cell phone number. He never turns his phone off. You can just call him whenever. And no, but seriously, anything we can do to help with that would be.
Thank you.
Again, it's all taxpayer dollars, and with the budget that we're about to go through, we do the same thing. We look at we look at the whole thing, but all of us have gone through the entire budget and looked at it line by line, and just make sure that there's nothing that can be trimmed back, or there's nothing that is everything should have a reason behind it. So I'm glad you guys are looking at that, but you can't always fix it right away. So
I think coming to this budget season, this is my first with GSB. I think Stephanie's done a really good job of leading this effort for a number of years. I don't see anything, there's nothing dysfunctional in it. There's nothing that's not transparent. We just have to, continue to do that, to pay attention. We look for anomalies, we look for increases, we look for decreases too. We try to make sure that we're not, causing a strategic problem down the road. If we're going to eliminate a program or something, we have to sort of have data to back that up. So, and again, I think, and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think most of the increases around it are expected. They're sort of in line with the last year increase, and pretty much related to more students just coming in all the towns, I think, right? Fairly big kindergarten class that we're expecting. So, yep.
Does anyone have
Stephanie, you're muted.
Sorry. I just want to say GSB's budget is not as high as the secondary. So it's under 4%, and we have not approved of that. That's going to happen on Wednesday. We will approve a budget, and Newcastle is in a little bit of better shape there. I think we may, I don't know, but we won't see an increase because we receive more subsidy from the state.
Right.
So
the subsidy seems to be equalizing.
Yeah, it should be flat, or I think it's going to be a little under. So
no, you said that out loud. Now,
know.
you're not supposed to do that. Pretty
Right.
sure.
I did about, kind of
Well, we'll make it happen.
math in my head, so who knows? We'll find
Yeah,
out.
no, it does look good. But that's at some of the, it's with the revenue increase, you would expect it to potentially go down. And we also have costs that are coming across, but there's really nothing surprising. There's nothing out of the ordinary.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we're in pretty good shape. So
I do have to say
Go
also,
ahead.
just the COVID funds were really helpful this year.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, sorry. That's
No, that's
helpful.
well, that's actually, it's kind of giving you some credit. So maybe I'll do it instead of you. I think we didn't know what was going to happen last year. We had no idea how this was going to work. We hoped that the state or the federal government would help. So Stephanie sort of led some budgeting that put a lot of money aside that really sort of buffered us against potential shortfalls, or if there was equipment. I mean, we didn't even know if we're going to have masks and hand sanitizer. So it turned out that the business manager in the central office did an exceptional job with the principal, kind of going through and getting a couple of rounds of funding that offset that. It was really great. So it meant that we did not have a very significant increase in sort of material around handling the pandemic, which was a lot. I mean, just, tens of gallons of hand sanitizer and thousands of masks. And so that did work out really well. And I think a lot of that, there's a lot of credit that's deserved there, because it was really hard to budget and plan for that blind. So we now know what to do in a pandemic, which is nice. And we ended up, kind of having these ad hoc policies that we'll keep around and we'll abstract in case we, COVID 28 or whatever we need. So, but it's not something that school districts really think about. So we've done some pretty good work there.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Jesse or Stephanie?
I got one question. I heard a request from Stephanie about verification of students as residents. I guess how's that done, and how do we approach that, do you think?
So, do you want to go ahead, Stephanie? You start.
I don't
talk to the
know,
town side.
actually.
Okay.
I don't know.
So I can just say, in terms of the town side of things, it's always a bit of a moving target, and the target moves faster in the last 3 years, and particularly the last 12 months. And we're going to talk to a guy after Stephanie and Jesse get off, who's going to maybe talk about that in more detail. But we don't have like a list of residents. Like I think that's kind of a natural thing of, oh, you have a list of residents and everyone knows who. Like, you really don't have that, or we don't have that. I know in my last community, smaller town, less in and out, less summer involvement, and that was the culling of the list, and the management of the list was like its own job. So it takes a lot of work to get there. And there's a number of ways you get there. There's car registrations. There's obviously your voter registration. Because there's a lot of people who dabble in one or two of the other, but not three. We have a policy and a form that we ask new folks who have come in that they get from the OS office. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse or Stephanie, feel free. But I believe there's a form that they will get, and they'll bring it into the office to say, okay, we're new here. What do we do? And then the office, so the clerks, Michelle or everyone will say, yes, they've registered their car here. Yes, they've voted. They're registered to vote. And we have a lease here that says that they're residents, and then they can take that back to the school building. So that's a pretty involved way to try to make sure. But that's usually you see a rush on that in August. It's the folks that come in October or March. I know October 1 is an important date for those school population numbers from the state. So I know there's a pretty strong effort to make sure we get a good number for October 1. But once we get outside that kind of usual period, it does kind of waver in the wind. So the thing that we're also working on, Tor, I think, is to try to improve our stockpile of who's here, who's not here. And one way we've been talking about that a lot is, we have Trio, and the Trio system is this thing called Central Parties, which basically is everybody. So it used to be when you come in and let's say you had to register your dog, that was like one record in one part of it. And then you had your car registration, which is one record and another part of it. It never kind of synthesized everything into one, where we didn't really even know who our customers were, which seems kind of crazy. Now that's kind of work. Now we have that. So we have some data, but we haven't really got our hands into it to try to use that to help this goal, because at $11,000 per student, or 11-ish, not to mention what's happening at GSB, we obviously, it's an important decision. It's an important discussion for us to be able to aid and support our school board. So I think as we get better ways to manage data, I think we can be more efficient in doing it. It just hasn't been a high enough priority, and maybe we haven't had the tools. But I think we're getting closer to that day where we can almost, we see, okay, this is going through, and so it automatically kind of dings us. Okay, we got to follow through. And we're such a small town. When somebody comes in to register their car for the first time, the alarm bells do go off. So there is somewhat of a passive way that we're recognizing this, but I wouldn't say it's, there's some sort of regimen to it in any way. So there is a process there, but it can always get better, and we'll try to keep doing that.
So it's an art. It's it's the student that moves from Newcastle to Demerscata is, that's where we want to be cognizant of.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mhm. So it's true. It's all the towns have to be on top of it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. You're looking into that.
Yeah. That's great. Does anyone have anything else? Anything else that you guys have, Steph or Jesse?
I think we just have to say that Josh is ending his second term, so 6 years on the school board, and we'll be thanking him again. That's in June, but it's nice to recognize him here as well. And we don't have a cooler or mug, but those are cool ideas for him.
We're not getting him a cooler.
Okay. Well. Anyway, thanks guys for your time, and invite us back again. Okay, or we'll invite ourselves back.
And at any point, John knows how to reach us. Just if you have questions, if you have concerns, just connect anytime. And if you need us to come back and talk publicly, we're here.
Yeah, and the same goes for you guys. If anything you want to discuss with us, feel free just to contact us and we'll get you on an agenda. So
great, thank you.
Thank you again for all your work and everything you've done. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night, everyone.
All right.
Good night.
Bye, John.
See you guys. See you, Jesse.
All right. So I see Jim Murphy Jr. Sitting in the waiting room. And so I thought
not assessor.
I'm not going to change anything tonight, Jim. Okay, I'm hands off. My hands off the keyboard. Okay.
And so maybe we'll jump around. We're jumping around a little bit tonight. So unless Jim wants to sit through our entire municipal budget review, which I don't think.
Not really.
What do you say? You want to do it? You want to sit through the whole thing?
No.
No. All right.
My lighting is terrible here.
We're gonna move down to 8.1. We're going to turn over to Jim for the 22 townwide revaluation update.
So I'm pretty much done. The next step in this process is going to be sending values out to property owners. That will cause some excitement out there, without question. Our job is not to come up with the exact value for everybody's property. Our job is to come up with an equitable distribution of the taxation of the town. By doing so, having valuations that are reasonable, consistent, and as fair as possible. We're not charged with being perfectly accurate. It's impossible to do that. We do try. From the property cards that were sent out, and this will probably be a fairly reasonable percentage of response, out of the 1,300 property cards that were sent out or thereabouts, I had feedback from about 100 people. I was hoping for more, but that's all there is. The majority of the corrections was minutia. Some spelling, some I'm on a paved road, not a dirt road. I'm on a dirt road, not a paved road. I just put on metal roofing, and I've taken the asphalt shingles off, and things of that magnitude throughout. There wasn't anything that said I've got something totally wrong, which was good to see, which means, the last 13 years has been trying to be up on top of what was happening with properties. And I think that's a little bit of a reflection of that, is having a constant feedback with the taxpayers, which is hugely important. I don't know what the final taxable value is yet. That number is going to change even from today to 2 weeks from now. That number will be changed from new building permits, some additional corrections. There may be some people wanted to see what the value is going to be before they said, well, here's the details about the properties. Some property values are going to double, without question. Someone might say, why did they double? Well, they were only being assessed for half as much as they recently sold for. Property sells for $450 and it's assessed for $200. That value is probably going to double. And that's not an unusual circumstance. The highest percentage changes in properties in the town are on the low end of the criteria. A property assessed for $10,000 went up to $30,000 for whatever reason, and it tripled. Well, there's only one or two of things like that. It's a pretty small impacts. I'll point out that where we're at right now is kind of like when you wash your car. You do a good job washing your car, and you clean the windows, and you vacuum the car out, and you tune it up, and it's running perfectly. And my wife comes out 2 hours later and says, you missed a spot. That's kind of where we're at right now. We're looking for those little spots that are left to be done. I've calibrated the town using our cost schedule and what is sold in the town. And at the moment, I'm at 102.42% on average. That ranges from 102% for waterfront residentials on the river to 102.8% for the condos, specifically at 75 Main Street. I've gone a little bit above 100%. Specifically, that the data that I'm seeing from last October to now is that the town is going to be undervalued again in 2 years. Maybe. No one knows. If I go to 102% and we're losing 2% a year, we're going to be okay for 4 or 5 years maybe. And that's what I'm more targeting. I would rather go up once and back down if we need to, and we see what the COVID market did. I think it's better to go up and come back than it is to try and go up twice in 3 years. The market for this year, specifically for 21, we have 13 sales. We're at 91% on those 13 sales. So looking at the future from when this work is effective, the numbers are going to continue to get worse. So that's why I've targeted 102.4%, as it turns out. We need to be within a range of 10% of all our major property classes. We are within 0.8% of all our major property classes. So the quality is good, the level is good, and we're pretty much ready to go. Of the 1,300 parcels or thereabouts, 981 had an increase in value between 0.1% and 99%. 187 so far have had no change in value. 229 have had a decrease. Most of those decreases are rural land in the rural part of Newcastle. The market is showing tremendous activity down River Road. Contrary to conventional thinking, the Damascotta River actually commands a higher parcel average value than the lake does, which is kind of backwards from what you might think. You might think the lake is going to be more active and have more value, but the heaviest purchases have been down on the river. One recent sale down there, the property was assessed for high 200s. It just sold for $900 and something thousand. Large acreage on the river seems to be very popular. We have multiple sales of properties in the $1 million range of large acreages with houses without buildings. It's actually very impressive to see that kind of a feedback. Back to that. So I do want to touch on where buyers are coming from. In the study itself, 41% of the buyers came from within Lincoln County, 20% were within Maine, and 38% were from out of state. The out-of-state buyers are not pushing the values up. I want to make that very, very clear. This is not a revaluation based on the COVID market. This predates the COVID market for the most part. What I think is pushing values up is interest rates have gone down and there's more buying power per dollar for the low interest rates than there was before, specifically 2 years ago. The numbers that I've played around with show me that there's about a 20% increase in the market over the last 2 years, just in the buying power of a dollar as compared since the interest rates have gone down. And I think that's very much pushing the market more than the out-of-state buyers. Anecdotally, there's a buyer in town who came from within the state, and he said that the market's going up because of the out-of-state buyers. And I said, well, they're also coming from Cape Elizabeth. So it's just not local buyers that are pushing this. People are moving up this way from the more populated areas of the state, which I don't blame them. So, you know, it's very interesting to go through this work and to see all the little bits and pieces that come together. Newcastle Chrysler is going to change hands next Wednesday. Also a significant event. And we'll see how that plays into the market. You know, we only have 2 real commercial sales in the last 3 years. So it's difficult to pin down what the commercial market's doing, but you know, a lot of moving parts in this, a lot of bits of information that I put in, I take out, I consider, I don't consider, I don't ignore. It's an amazing exercise if you're into this kind of thing. So I hope to have value letters out within a couple of weeks. Firm that up with we're going to use an outside vendor again for that. Down the road, the reasons for an abatement, I hope, are going to be very minimalized. I'm going to use the same process I use in other towns to basically put a deadline on when I need to hear from people. It's going to be a couple of months out. And people are going to need to show me that the value is wrong, not just a little bit different, but totally wrong. It's a high hurdle to cover at this point. I've gone down through the town's inventory and the new valuations 4 or 5 times now. I know the percentages between what they were and what they are now, and what's going up and what's going down, and have checked all the worst ones, the ones that went up a lot and the ones that went down a lot, and really try to make sure that those numbers are reasonable and fair. Some reasons for not issuing an abatement, and this will come up. The increase from last year to this year is not a reason for an abatement. Taxes went up, and some property owners are going to have significant increases in taxes. But then again, some of those properties sold for $800,000 and they're being assessed for $350,000. Those values need to change. More than happy to provide people with the sales ratio study, which I have on the other screen. Just double checking all of that many times over. And it isn't imperfect work. There's 1,500 parcels. 900 plus of those have buildings on them. Those buildings have a house, and they have decks and garages and sheds and everything else that goes on the buildings. There's going to be some errors out there. I want to correct everything that can be corrected prior to the end of June. When we get to commitment, we're going to be pretty locked and loaded. We're going to be, I should be able to have everything, any corrections done at that point. But we're in the minutia stage at this point. Very little left to change, fix, adjust to make this happen. Assessors are very powerful, but I'm also very respectful of how this impacts people individually. And it'll be tough on some individuals. Some people will probably say, well, I finally caught up with our values. So we also get, if I have a real question about a property, I will dig into the registry of deeds and see what the mortgages are and see what the refinances are. And of lately, more often than not, if it's a cash out refinance, my value is not even to the mortgage amount, let alone, my value could be 80% of 120% of the mortgage amount. And I'm not seeing that. It's a little scary, but I hope people aren't overextending themselves. This market's going to change. If interest rates go up, this market's over. That's what I see at this point. But I do see some panic buying here a little bit. A couple of sales have popped up here. One down in Friendship clearly is a panic buy. They want to get out of wherever they are and come to rural Maine, not understanding that they might be overpaying. So I'm very cautious of that. And we might be seeing some of that right now. The inventory's down. People want to buy a house before there isn't any house to buy. And the next thing you know, they're in a bidding war and spending $50,000 too much for the property. So a lot of moving parts. Got to be very careful and very cautious. So,
Rob?
Jim, one point, just again to clarify, you're not using the values since the pandemic in the database on which you base the values for the town. Just so this panic buying, that's not in any of the numbers that you're using for the revaluation.
No, that panic buying, I think, is mostly this year, 2021, maybe a little bit towards the end of last year. I think vaccines will slow down the market a little bit. Some of the data that's coming in, I'm gonna have to use some of it. That's why I trended my April 1st, 2020 numbers. I trended those up to 104.4% on average. I'm guessing the future a little bit, 102.4% on average. But I'm guessing the future a little bit. It's been my experience that markets don't fall back 10 percentage points. They might fall back a couple percentage points if things slow down. But there's the federal government has sent money that, quite frankly, not all of us need. And some people are using that to buy cars, and their confidence in the future may be a little high. But the housing market, my experience has been, this is probably the fourth or fifth market boom I've been through in my career, and they never dropped back to what they were before the market boom. It's not going to happen. People will sit on their properties and the number of sales will go down, but it's not going to suddenly drop 15% tomorrow, unless interest rates go up, and then they will. But like I said, our job is equity and having the various property classes on a level playing field. That's our most important thing. We could be at 120% as long as we're consistent with 120% across the board. We'll be outside of state law at that point, but our duty is to be consistent as possible with what we know. And like I said, it's not to be perfect value on every property. It's to be equitable.
Yeah, and the value only affects what we're going to be discussing in a little bit here, which is the municipal budget is what is gonna, and the school budget, all that stuff. The budget is what drives the cost of taxes.
Exactly right. An 8th grade student can do a tax rate. It's pretty straightforward. It's budget divided or taxable taxes to be raised divided by valuation. You get a mill rate. Mm-hmm. My duty is the valuation. Mill rate's going down, no question about it. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but it's definitely going down. But the town, and I'm not bragging or anything, but the town is really as well set up as anybody in Lincoln County right now for going forward with valuations and valuations. Everybody else is going to have a revaluation at some point to catch up, because they're going to be at 60-70% of value, and we're going to be 102, 198, something like that. I did Bremen last year, jumping ahead a little bit. I'm already back down to 85% in 1 year, because the market just kept going down there. I didn't guess far enough. Not enough courage, maybe, but.
And Jim, I would just add that this is a bit of a rip the Band-Aid off scenario. Going slow is probably more painful than doing what the market is telling us at one fell swoop. So there is the part of get it over with, and then we can all live in the new world of what's been happening, at least in the market for 3 years at least. Right. The other thing I'd add too is, just using the 100, that reached out to you, for Selectmen, for you all, and for myself, it's instructive to remember 100 people. If 100 people call us and say that their value is wrong, that's a lot of people, right? I mean, if we got 100 calls, we would be inundated. But that's still less than 10% of all the property owners in Newcastle. And so the answer isn't to minimize the 100. The answer is to say, and Jim said the first thing he said here tonight, which is really this is about our way of devising the proportionality of the taxes. It's really about that. And we're using value as the way we do that. And so the state says, if we're within 90%, we're fine, we're good. So if we're, what's 90% of 1,500 properties, right? So if you're looking at it from the other way, and I know this isn't the way that they look at it, but that's a big number of properties that could be wrong, right? And that's just one side of the equation saying that is wrong. So the law is really on the side of us trying to make sure that as long as we can prove that we have a consistent methodology that's equitably, laid about across town. The court system would find that favorably, and I believe that Jim's going to do work that's going to allow us to do that wholeheartedly. And then, because that's what this comes down to, in situations when the temperature is hot and the increases are considerable, that's where the pressure comes. Is, well, we're doing something wrong, and how could you do this? And so you have to. I just want to, I guess, prepare the four of you that. This is, this could, you're going to probably get phone calls about this. You're going to have people who are going to say, this isn't right, this isn't fair, and cite some of those items that Jim noted. But you have to remember that 1, 2, 50, 100 don't necessarily indicate that all 1,500 properties have been done wrong. And I know that, and it's a different thing than how we handle a lot of things we do. If 3 people come into a meeting in the old days when we could have meetings, people can come in, that's a lot of people. And we're listening and we're talking, and we're having dialogue. If we had 300 people come into a meeting, well, that's 1/5. And so the scope of what we're talking about is so much bigger in this realm. The math is really on the side of what's being presented. And so what I think the message is to people who are asking questions and want to know about it is, yes, we think we think that the overall is right, but there's a process to get that dealt with. Your number might be wrong, so there could be fault. Bring it in. Let's have a chat about it. Talk to Jim. Jim will have a process. If they're not satisfied with Jim's process, they have the ability to file an abatement request, and then you all can decide on it. And if they don't like what your answer is, then they can go to the county commissioners. And if they don't like what they have to say, I mean, there's a process to it, is my point. And so, not that we want to get that far down the road. We want to resolve these things sitting down with Jim in the next couple months, and hopefully the vast majority of them can understand how the number came about or where it comes from. But this is the beginning of a long-term process, and the most important thing is to understand the methodology that Jim's using, that you're supportive, and figure out what you need to be to either be supportive or not supportive or what have you. But you need having the base of what we're doing right here is absolutely crucial for you to be able to answer those questions in the next few months, because they will come and they will be, they're going to challenge you. But I would say, to residents who are listening, this is a process that there's no way there isn't a bullseye throw on every dart toss on this. It's more than with our eye blindfolded. We have a really good methodology in place, but we're going to miss sometimes, and we need your help to try to make it better. And in the process, we'll have a better commitment in the end. And that's what this is about. It's about having the most equitable way for us to assess taxes, to bring back to the front of it again. And we can do that, but it's going to be a process, and there's going to be numbers that, as Jim very properly laid out, and I'm sure you guys are seeing it on your neighborhoods, or so-and-so, did you hear what so-and-so got for their house? And we've all kind of had those chats here over the last year or two. This is when we re-level everything. And once we get to the end of this and we get through this, and it all dies down, you should be able to feel better about the fact that those are paying appropriate for what the level of their house and their property is worth. And that's important, because right now we're not you could argue we're not taxing everyone equitably right now, because we know our values are off from what the market is saying. So we have a problem right now. You have to remember there's a problem that's driving this. It's not we're creating a problem. The problem exists. And if we don't fix it, we have a much bigger problem in our hands, because then you could argue that we're not treating everyone equitably, and those who are overpaying vis-a-vis those who are underpaying right now could be very upset and have a right to be. So I'm just in the big picture here, that it's so important. And so if you have time, if you have questions over the next 2 weeks, jot them down to Jim, come into the office, set up a time, Zoom, whatever, because I want to make sure the four of you and really residents in town who want to know more about this process, it's really important everyone understands why we're doing this, because why we're doing this is really so much more important than the fact that numbers will be different. And so I also, Jim put together a memo that kind of outlines some of what we're talking about here, and I emailed that to all of you so you can look at that more in depth. And if you have more thoughts, certainly reach back to them.
So today in the mail, I have the preliminary state valuation, and they're saying using the 2019 valuations, the town's at 80%. And if we're at 80% 18 months ago, we're going to be at 65 by the time this is over. And then we're going to move values up across the board 40 or 50% for everybody. And that's the pain that we're avoiding right now, and taking care of and being proactive and being good managers of our valuations. And the state is not going to ignore the COVID market because they think it's a COVID market. They're going to use these sales in this time frame, 2021, 22, whatever it is going to be, going forward. So whether we think we're going to dodge something or not, in a year or two, it's going to be sitting on our laps. We are going to be significantly undervalued without any action. Personally, I'm not convinced 102% on average is good enough. I would have liked to have gone to maybe 106 or 7, but I don't have that kind of courage. And that's okay with this. And that's based on, doing Bremen last year, where I took the town to 98%, and I'm already at 85 a year later. I'm already 14 points off, in that particular market. So I think I see what's coming. I'm very confident about it. Like I said, I've been at this since 1989, either as an assessor or as an appraiser. I've seen these markets before, and they never shot back to where they were. We're not going to go back to 2014 valuations. Even in 08, which was the 06, 07 market, that only took a year and a half in 2010, 2011 for that market to come back to where it was before that. It slowed down, but it never dropped back down in value. It stayed pretty constant. So, and we're really adjusting the 2005 building revaluation too. So we're looking at a 15-year time frame since the buildings were really touched and revalued. What was selling for 175 is now selling for 3.25. It's pretty spooky. Very, very spooky.
Rob?
Two things. One, Jim, is it safe to say that all the groundwork that you've been doing in this revaluation, if these values keep going, you're not going to have to redo everything. It's just going to be another adjustment in a year or two.
That's my plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I've done in all the other towns where we've done revaluations, Bremen spent $85,000 for a land and building revaluation. We did the update that I did last year was $4,000, and that's what I'm looking to do, is to right, wrong, or indifferent, every 3 to 4 years we're going to do some sort of a little adjuster. Try to keep the percentage movements up and down in small bites. Like I said, if we don't take a big bite right now, we're going to get hammered in a year and a half. And we're going to be below 70%. We're going to get a letter from the state. We're going to start losing tree growth reimbursement, which is big in this town. For every 1% under 70, we lose 10% of our tree growth reimbursement. That's money out the window. Homestead exemption will also go down. And property owners will pay more by having a lower homestead exemption. So there's no good answers going forward for taxpayers. And as John said, it's a little bit of, rip the Band-Aid off, but it's going to be worse. It's definitely going to be worse down the road.
That gets my second question. So there are clearly there are penalties if we don't keep our valuations up to date. But there's also for things like, we were just talking about the school budget, that Newcastle in the last 3-5 years has had gotten over the mill rate where we were getting some subsidy beyond the minimum receiver. The mill rates get adjusted by the state for things like reimbursement. Is that correct? So is our revaluation and our mill rate dropping dramatically? Is that by itself going to change our eligibility for things like educational
No,
funding?
no, the state, most of the school districts work off the state valuation. So in our case, let's just say we're at $200 million, but we're at 80%. The state's going to adjust us up to full valuation, and that's the number they use for school budgets and for county apportionment of our fair share. So no matter what percentage we're at or what our mill rate is at, I think the state school mill rate though is 8 point something. I forget. That's a side thing.
That's right. Yeah.
But all the towns get adjusted to full 100% value. It's been my experience, the closer we are to 100%, the less wiggle room there is with the state. You know, we're already being assessed or valued by the state at 100%. So that's not going to make any difference. So it's important that we keep our numbers up so we can, you know, get the tree growth, get the full homestead for people. You know, for, you know, if it goes down $5,000, which it easily could, because I have to adjust the homestead exemption by the certified ratio. So first 70%, we've got to take 70% of 25,000. That 30% lands on their tax bill. We don't, we get more money by being at 100%. I guess that's a better way of putting it. I had a state representative and I posed that question, does the town get less money if we are at, if we're at less than 100%? And quoting, he said, you get all the reimbursement you're entitled to. I go, you did not answer my question. And so I figured it out at that point because I play with numbers more than I should maybe when I'm bored on Saturday morning. But when, you know, when the town's not at 100%, it's costing taxpayers money in some form or fashion. We get below 70 and the deal's off. We're going to lose our, I don't know what our tree growth reimbursement, but we have a lot of tree growth.
But Jim, that's one side of it, right? There's the other side, which is the Scarborough, well, not the Scarborough case, but taxpayers saying we have not equitably, our methodology stinks. Basically, we're ignoring. We're at 80%, 65%. We don't care. If I'm someone who, let's say, right now is, you know, is seeing no increase in my value, but I'm paying the same amount of taxes today, but would theoretically see a decrease under the 100% values. Can you lay out briefly, very like what that looks like? Because basically they're challenging the tax commitment, correct, in court? Well, I'm saying if you were like, if property owners said, we're being we're being inequitably treated, and we're suing the community because we feel as though it's an improper commitment.
Yeah. So you could have a problem if our non-waterfront residentials were at 100%,
there you go.
and our riverfronts were at 70%. The 100% class property owners have a certifiable claim of discrimination because they're treated differently as their percentage of valuation compared to another class of property. It's more important that the class of properties statistically are all in the right, in the same ballpark. As I mentioned, we're allowed 10% plus or minus. So if you know, 100 to 91 is allowable, 100 to 90 is not. So we're allowed 10 percentage points. We are 0.8 percentage points apart. So statistically, we are good to go. long and short of it. Nobody's being discriminated against. They may not like the answer, but they're not being treated unfairly compared to other parts of the town. And that's the most important thing. Like I said, we're not in a accurate value business. We're in the equitable valuation business, and there's a big difference. Just value is market value, but it's not market price, which is something totally different. We're in the market valuation different business. On average, we're at 102%, but that also means some are above that and some are below that. That's how you get to 102%. In theory, half the town is overvalued and half is undervalued at 100%. In theory, it's a concept.
But you want the spread to be this, you don't want it to be like wider than I can hold my arms across. Yeah.
And right now arms aren't very far apart. Things are pretty tight.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be. Like I said, it's a lot of fun. So it's going to be scary coming up, but it's a lot of fun if you like this kind of stuff. But it takes an effort. We've been at this for 6 months, and I bring the paperwork onto the computer and circle around, and I adjust this, adjust that, adjust this, I put this back, I put that back, I add this on, I take this off. We ended up with a spread of 0.8. That's about as good as I can do, without really kind of getting bizarre on it. I'm kind of borderline there already. It's important to do a good job. Like I said, we're going to be set up. We're going to be very set up. The town as a whole, we're ahead of the game. There's going to be a lot of towns and cities in the state are going to, they're going to have to do revals they don't want to do and haven't prepared for and haven't done anything about. And if they're just going to do a full board door to door, it's $120 a parcel.
Not easy to be first, Jim. But when for them it's not easy to be first, but when they see it in the paper 3 years from now, they say, oh yeah, I know the answer to that. I'm glad we're through it. That was my experience in Rockport, because in 2003 I was on the board after a bump, and it was painful because we were the first, but in the end it worked itself out. We'll be fine. We have a good assessors agent, we got a smart board, and we got a good office staff who can manage that and get the right questions to the right people. And so we're going to help everyone through this, residents and the four of you guys. So we're in good shape. We're going to get to a commitment this year, and it's going to work well. I have a lot of confidence in the process.
You get your budget numbers, I'll give you an early mill rate. Don't quote me.
That's next, Jim. Hold on.
It will be different. There's a lot to do. But, I've got, $8 million worth of property to go check, just building permit wise. Numbers are going to change. They're going to be, I'll know towards the end of June. Talk to me at the end of June, and we'll have whatever little corrections there are. And there's going to be little corrections, not in volume, but in minutia. And I'll have all the new value for the new construction. I haven't even touched that yet, so that needs to be done in the next 60 days as well. A lot going on.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yep.
Great. Does anyone have anything else for Jim? Any other questions? Thanks a lot, Jim. That was great.
All right. I have to go for a walk with the wife now, so
yeah.
I was hoping to take a little longer.
Show your reflector.
Yeah, we'll see. That's right.
You can stay. You can stay for a budget discussion.
Yeah.
No, I have enough pain.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Thank you very much. All right. So moving on, where we're jumping around a little bit right now, if it's okay with everybody, I think what I'd like to do is finish up our other business real quick, and then we can dive into the budget and just go until we drop. So
or not.
That
Or-
won't be long. That won't be long.
Or
You know,
no.
I got my
Lose it.
shot today, Joel, right? Like that
That-
could happen. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Wanda, keep an eye on me, okay? Please.
I'm half asleep already, so I don't know
Oh,
if I'm
gee.
fun to keep an eye on.
So we're gonna move. What we're gonna do, just to get everyone, keep everyone on their toes. We're gonna move backwards right now. So we're gonna move back up the agenda. So we're gonna do 7.1 first, which is the town warrant for $138,042.13.
So move.
I have a second.
Second,
Seconded by Tor. Any discussion? I'm just trying to.
Yeah,
Yep. Wanda.
I have a question if I can find it, but somewhere on here, it talks about under Public Works. So winter sand cost was 35,000. And then right after that,
Yeah.
there is February salt. There's winter salt for 35,000, and after that, there's February salt uses. So if we're buying the salt, why are we getting charged for usage? And wouldn't that be under snow plowing and salting?
Let me look at that invoice. I don't know. I'm not sure about the answer to that, Wanda.
Because that doesn't make sense to me that we would buy salt and then get charged for a February amount of salt usage.
The only, yeah, I don't even want to guess, but let me find out. Let me look at it. We had some issues. The salt was coded wrong in the initial warrant that went out, and so we had some things that we worked around. So let me take a look at that invoice, and I'll get back to you. Okay, I can hold that out, not pay it until we get an answer. But yeah, I don't know. I know we had a bill for salt for that amount. In that 35,000, I knew that had come in, but I hadn't seen the February salt usage one. So let me take a look at that.
It just didn't make sense. That was the only question
Yeah.
I had.
Yeah, it's got that 2 lines. I don't know if one is for, it's not for application because that's part of the regular. They don't just for the application. So that seemed duplicate. And a couple other things. One, the very beginning is keys and locks for 2,500. Is that rekey the office?
Yes, rekey the office. So this, I think I mentioned this a while ago. We have the lock system that we have. It's just a very secure lock system, Medico. It's great. The problem is that the person who owns the dies that creates the keys is now out of business. And so we don't own the dies. The person who owns the business owns the dies. And so unfortunately, when he goes out of business, so goes our locks. So we had to reset that. Also, part of this is for those who have been in the office, these things that you go out on the doors and you turn them and then the doors open or close. We're also going to get those. Some people call them door handles and latches. So that's also part of this. This is one part of it, though. There's this second half of this payment. So it's a sizable amount. But the other thing it's going to do is it's going to really better set us up for the next step of how we would key all of our buildings. So it's this will make a lot more sense when we get to the end of it, as opposed to what we had before, which was effectively a dead system we couldn't add on to.
Okay. Another thing, there's a I guess for the fire station, $1,900 for a thermostat. Is
Yep.
that?
All our thermostats went poof. In fact, anyone who's been in the chief's office in the last, 3 years noticed that it was hotter than, where. And so the sense that the Dead River tech had is that the actual, it kept calling for heat in that room. We're going to see if that works or not. I don't, there wasn't a whole lot of sense. So we replaced, but the thermostat in the community room was also gone. So I think they were all put in at once. And so we replaced them all at once to try to get everything back.
Okay, so it wasn't just one thermostat for $1,900. Okay.
No. We replaced all of them in the building. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so then I saw that the town received the CBDG grant, and then obviously it doesn't show that the town's receipt of the grant money. It just shows our disbursement to Split
That's
Rock.
exactly right. Yeah. So it's right. We received the money, and this is showing that we're dispersing to Topher and company.
Okay. And then finally, under the state things, there's a Moses report. What's a Moses report?
So when he parted, no, just kidding. Moses is the database that's used by Inland Fisheries and Wildlife for all of the fishing licenses, hunting licenses, all of that. And so Moses, it's basically what we sell out to for IFW, we send back to them. Yep.
Okay. Right.
And just one more thing, in the big scheme of things, it's pretty low money, but it says orange cones for almost $800. Do we replace all of our cones or something for?
Let me see. I gotta find it. Sorry. Oh yeah, the cones. I know we lost a lot of cones during the last storm, or last few storms this winter. I don't know how many though, so I'll pull that. I'll send you a copy of the invoice. I'll send you that one and the other one above, so you guys can look at it.
So should we revise the warrant amount to pass it? Or just say with those changes?
Yeah, what I would maybe, unless, I mean, I won't take words of it, but if you want to say pass it, but hold those checks until further approval, I can do that too. Because that's the making sure that you guys are aware and online, rather than changing the number and then we're doing math and
exactly. Yeah, that sounds good. So man.
Yeah.
Second that again.
Okay. So anyone have anything else? It's good. You just keep putting that Mountain Dew down, don't you?
It's Arnold Palmer. Oh, you can't see him right here. I'm getting a little hot here, so I'm serious. I'm like, oh boy. So it looks like I'm beet red, but anyway, this is like a science. This is like a science experiment. People watch the effects of the vaccine on people. Anyway.
All in favor of passing the town warrant with the with those items discussed being held out until further review? Passes 4-0. All right. So going back up, well, let's see, how much will we jump around today? Let's just go to 6.1, town manager's report, because that will bring us back into.
Well, do you want to do the zoning code thing just to?
What's that?
Isn't there a fee schedule update?
We're going to do that, but we'll go to the town manager's report first. Anything you want to go over, John?
I've read it all, but let me just talk about the procession for Clate Services. Begins at 1:30 at Strong Hancock Funeral Home. It's going to go through town to Huntley Station, the fire station. There'll be a walk-through visitation that will begin at 2 o'clock. So there isn't going to be a lot of parking. Obviously, we have something on the agenda to talk about closing Liberty Street as well. So parking is going to be very, very limited, and so please plan accordingly. But it'll be great that people will have a chance to pay their respects. Unfortunately, I'll be out of the area, so I'm not able to attend. But we'll obviously, I hope there'll be a strong presence there from the town office and from the community, no doubt. So that's that will be great to be able to pay those respects. Changing subjects entirely, the nomination papers for various offices were due on Friday, and so we have 4 individuals running for the 3-year seats for Selectmen. We have 2 individuals running for the 1-year seat, and then 2 people that are each running for, 1 person running for the school board, 3-year term, 1 person running for the GSB board, also a 3-year term. Clate's seat will obviously need to be filled. So at some point, the board will have to make a decision as to when that would be handled, whether it's a special election or what have you. But we obviously we weren't really in a position at all to handle that at this time. So those ballots will be started to be put together. Obviously, the budget process obviously is the other thing that has to go on the ballot as well. So that needs to come together. Talked about the streetlights that's in there. Obviously, the Amtrak situation is seemingly coming back to life, so that's exciting. It's nice to see that those things are still coming back to the fore. We obviously talked about the dedication of the town report. That's a very exciting piece as well. So really, in terms of everything else, I think we're in a good spot. Michelle's away this week. She'll be returning next week from vacation. And Shelley and Jody are doing a great job holding things down. It's been very busy. We've had a lot of people coming into the office, and so we're excited to see people, and hopefully we'll be able to weather the storm with Michelle's absence. So it's a nice thing, but that's about it.
Good. All right. So moving back up to our new 4.5 zoning code fee schedule, April 9th, 2021 update.
So the only thing here is an addition of a $25 small scale project plan permit fee. So basically the long and the short of this is that there are several items that particularly in rural, that if you were putting in an addition, because it doesn't require review of that particular type. So for example, an architectural component, a massing component, a building addition, because we aren't using those items in our review of properties and lots in D1, effectively, there was no fee for their review whatsoever. And that's a bit problematic because then the question is, well, do we just not have any fees at all and no permits? And I don't believe that was the intent of the process laid out. I think the idea, certainly in the URDIS conversation in December when you set the fee schedule, was to minimize any impacts and minimize costs, to not provide them as a barrier to development. But I don't believe that the role was for zero. And it creates problems to not charge fees for items that are, clearly of some size. I mean, if you were building a new house, for example, there would be no fee for that without any sort of small scale project plan. And it is a small scale project plan, but there would be no fee. And so it creates this very strong, strange thing. And at what point is Jim triggered to go out and review that as something to be added to our valuation? So in any event, I think that there's some language that probably needs to be looked at in the core zoning code in regards to this, particularly in D1. But the best we could come up with, I think, was to set just a $25 flat fee for the small scale project plan. And then from then on, at least, it's fairly clear as to that there is some expectation of permitting, even if it's simply setbacks and all the normal levels of review that people have become accustomed to in rural in D1. So it's a lot to talk about $25, but it has a huge impact because obviously the vast majority of the town is D1. So that's where we are.
So I move that we accept the change of $25 for small project scale plan.
Do I have a second? Wanda, second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. All right. Back up to the top. All right, and then we just have to go, we'll move up to 4.4, revised 4.4, road closure, Liberty Street, April 17th. And this is just something we need to make a motion to close Liberty Street, John.
That's right. Yep, that's right.
And,
Exactly.
and it's just gonna be from 1, is it from 1 to, we have a time on that?
Well, I mean, the entire event starting at 1:30, but they'll be set up and the like. So much like with Pumpkin Fest, you know, there's a road closure, but if it's opened earlier, it's allowed. So at least for those times, you basically to say the closure of the day. I don't have any of the specific times in terms of when they're setting up or tearing down.
Should we say noon to 5 or something? What should we specify hours?
Or just do the day?
I wouldn't feel comfortable specifying hours unless I had a request specifically for that. But I mean, in the future, I think for Pumpkin Fest, for example, I would expect to specify the hours.
Yeah.
This situation is a little bit different, I think.
All right. So do I have a motion to close Liberty Street on April 17th?
So move.
Rob, do I have a second? Wanda?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. All right. So now we are back up to 4.3, municipal budget review. So we've had the budget for just about a week now. I'm sure everyone's had a chance to look through it, and have had a chance to talk to John if they had any questions. But I think the way I'd like to kind of do it is just go over it section by section, and if there's anything that comes up that we need to dig back into, we can dig back into it. John's put notes below each section to sort of explain some of these numbers, but I just want to make sure that everyone obviously feels comfortable with the budget, understands it, has their questions answered, doesn't feel like we're just pushing through things. So, we'll take all the time that we need to go through it. But I think that might be a good way to go through it. And we could just start with going through the municipal budget summary and take it from there. Does anyone have any other ideas or methods that they would like to use for going through this budget tonight as the board?
I would just say, I think, it's a solid budget. I think, I think the changes are things that we understand. The big one is the debt service.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of our roads program. And we knew it was coming, and it's hitting us this year. There's some other things, but there aren't any real big surprises, I think. So I think we can go through as needed, but I think I wasn't surprised by anything. I guess let's put it that way.
Yeah. Tor, do you have any feelings on how we go through the budget?
Well, I guess I'll just explain my perspective, I guess, is that I agree. I think all the incremental changes for the categories saying administrative operations made sense to me. Public safety, and then there's 3 items where the increase is more than 10%, and that was public services, public works, and debt services. Obviously, debt services is the that's the driver for the major driver for the increase in the budget this year. And the other public works and public services, I think, deserve to be, looked at in my mind, just to run through that. But I really don't, I really don't see anything in administrative operations and, public safety where the average of those increases is like 6% to, run through that in too much detail. So, I think that services is probably pretty understandable, pretty quick what that issue is. So, really just these couple of categories. Public works is probably the most time consuming to, just talk about that in my mind. But I guess that's my perspective.
Okay. And Wanda, do you have
Yeah,
any?
I talked to John today. I had a couple of questions about public services, but I didn't connect the dots between solid waste and the transfer station, which that's a huge change, but we don't have a whole lot of control over that. The LTCD TV, that's a 50% increase, which I kind of question. I mean, in the big scheme of things, it's still small potatoes, but a 50% increase is still a lot. And then other than that, I think when we get deeper down in the budget, I think looking at, public works and the capital roads budget, I think I had some thoughts about those that I'd like to talk about. But everything else is so much that is really out of our control. So,
Yep.
I think the only other thing that I talked to John about too is wages with the firemen. And my only concern is, budgeting for the fire chief. I think, budgeted a lot more than we did this year. I think that's worth a little bit of discussion, but John and I also talked about, that's a bigger conversation that we're going to have once we decide how we're going to, in which way we're going to replace this position. And he explained that's kind of just a placeholder for that. So it's, it's certainly not written in stone. So those were my thoughts just before we start.
Yep. And John, did you have anything in particular that you wanted to start with? This is your creation. You did a great job with it. I've been watching you, stopping in, talking to you once in a while. You've been slaving away. I've been seeing the Mountain Dews pile up on your desk. And
that's not good. That's not good. Yeah, it's been a little stressful. And really, I want to thank Stephanie and Jesse and Josh, because those guys, and Lindsay and the assistant superintendent and Craig, because the first time I saw the secondary budget, I think I probably had a cow. So they did some great work, and I know it's just math on their end, but whatever they did, I like the math better now than I did before. So keep doing that math, So that was a part of it. And the other thing is, again, I don't have an audit. So if I get an audit tomorrow from Fred Brewer, I might say, okay, we can't do this, but now we can do that. And so the moment we have that, I'll certainly reach out to you. I mean, I think this is a budget that you could pass and you could feel good about, frankly, with whatever priorities, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, I think that the bones of this are there. Whether or not, how much beyond that, I don't know, but the bones of the budget that you could pass by the voters in June are there. If, I don't think there's going to be anything tremendously different that would be, change things dramatically in the audit. I think it's a question of, is the overall rate of increase where you want it to be? Is there a way to bring that down? Does it have to be where it is? Are there a different set of priorities for roads? I think those are really the questions to me. And then, like Wanda said, there's placeholders in there. I mean, truthfully, we don't know. I mean, honestly, a week ago or 10 days ago, I never thought I'd be thinking about what we were going to have to do in terms of the fire chief's salary. That wasn't even, I didn't want, whether I didn't want that to be part of my thinking or what have you, it wasn't. So honestly, right before I hit send on this, I'm putting numbers in, and we're not going to know those answers by the time you guys get to the end of the budget. Probably, maybe you'll have a better idea than we do now. That's my hope. But it's the thing that honestly, it almost took me 10 years as a manager to figure out. Maybe that says more about me than it should, but this really is a starting point of a conversation. And you always feel like you get through this long budget process and like, okay, finally, all right. But that's really just the start. This is an opportunity for things to happen for the next 12 months. We have no idea what budget priorities will exist 9 months from now. And so we have to be flexible in whatever that is. If I come back to you guys and say, geez, we can't do road work on this road, or something else comes up, we have the ability to shift that. But what we're going to the voters is saying, these are what we think is a really good plan for the next 12 months. But voters recognize that things could change in 6 months dramatically, and we have to do what we have to do to make sure that the town operates in the best way possible. And so this is part of that respect and trust that the voters are giving us, both you as the elected officials and me working for the four of you, to make sure that we have that trust through the 12 months. And so, the numbers here aren't numbers that I've had ever here in Newcastle, but unfortunately, there's some things that we can't control. There's some things we can control, but not many, truthfully. And so whatever we can do to, I've been trying to shave this down. And unfortunately, this was, without going into figuring out what your priorities are in terms of the rest of the budget, the bones of the budget, that it can stand on, I feel good about it. The rest of it, I think, really is about the four of you figuring out how, what you want to accomplish, or what you want room to accomplish, I suppose, is a better way of putting it, in the next, 12, 15 months. So I'm ready to do whatever you guys want to do, whether it's department by department, whatever you think, guys. Yeah.
Rob?
One thing that I wanted to add, I think you mentioned that the audit isn't done. I think looking at our unassigned fund balance, I mean, we've talked about it in the past that, we're sitting on a very large fund balance. Whether we want to designate more of that towards capital projects, I think that's a discussion I don't want to lose. That's at the end of this budget process, that's a sort of a supplemental. I see that as a supplemental to our operating budget, but something I don't want to lose track of. I want to come back to.
And if I could just add to that, like the use of unassigned fund balance can be a very dangerous thing, in that if you use it to really balance your budget every year, if you have wild fluctuations in it, it can really make for a difficult time through the following year. And so what I proposed in here was flat, basically the same as last year. Last year's budget, the use of that number was directly attributed to the capital expenditures that you were talking about, Rob. And the capital expenditures are largely in the same range of what we talked about last year. That part, actually, that line is actually a little bit lower than it was last year, but it's close. But to do anything more or less, I was really uncomfortable without that audit in hand, to go, okay, this is where we are, this is where we're going. And I don't want to, this isn't criticism of Fred Brewer or Bill Brewer or anybody. I mean, they're doing amazing work to get caught up, because everything with COVID for what they do was pushed off tremendously. And so, this is not at all criticism of them. It's just the facts of it and where we are. But that number is always what we use as the baseline to figure out how much can we use upwards and above the amounts that they recommend we hold on to. And so, is that number higher than it was last year? Yes, I believe it is. Not tremendously so, because we didn't see that over budgeting of revenue, or I guess over collection of revenue that we usually have, because we're very conservative. We didn't have that last year for obvious reasons. Having said that, in next year's budget, we're actually going to have that. But I never like to budget based upon what I expect to have at the end of the budget in the coming fiscal year. I think it's kind of the dog chasing its tail a little bit. I prefer to see the audit, see a number, know that nothing's happened in the last 9 months, know that that money is sitting in the account so that we actually have cash in hand to be able to make that adjustment. It's a bit more conservative than I think some towns operate. Some want to go ahead, but I think that's the safest place for you to operate from. And then from there, you know, cash, what you have in hand. It's the same as with the state. We don't go to the absolute maximum of what we expect to receive in revenue sharing. We go a quick step below that because things can happen. And it's always good to underestimate revenues and over collect, because when you have that cash in hand, then you can make decisions as part of your budget process the following year. It just so happens a pandemic happened in between last budget and this budget. So we knew things would be different. And so I think all things considered, this is the best we could come up with. Am I happy with it? No, but I'm not happy that, I'm burning up here and my arm hurts, and, but that's the way, that's our life now, right? So we'll get there. We're going to get there. But yeah, I think next year's budget, because I look at these budgets 2 or 3 years down the road. Next year's budget, I think, could be much more like the last 5, 6 budgets you've had, where you're starting, we're going to have a bump, but I think we'll be able to level off a little bit more, even though we've been looking at some serious capital expenditures in roads. I think in the long term, I think this is a new normal with a lower mill rate, but a higher, valuation for some. But I think you're going to be able to maintain this expenditure level for a while. But we don't know about the schools, and seeing those level of increased kids, I'm worried about whether or not, state funding will always keep pace with what they have to charge. But that's big picture, big, I know we're talking about the municipal budget, but everyone on this screen right now, and I'm sure everyone watching, is immediately thinking about mill rate, because that's always what we talk about, is mill rate. And I always caution everybody to worry too much about the current year and not think about the next few years, because you can get a short-term pop from getting a low mill rate, but you pay for it if you're not careful in your budgeting. And so what I think we've done this year is it's a sizable jump, as everyone said, largely due to some, Academy Hill and some other things that came in, but this is the first year of the Academy Hill bond. And so that amount, really jumps us up. But once that's there, I think we'll be able to maintain that for some years to come. So
I just want to add,
that's the overall.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I absolutely don't believe we should use fund balance for operating budget. I think we should, any fund balance that we use should go to our bottomless pit of capital needs. And I think we do, whether it's this year or in a year soon, I think we want to look at those recommended balances compared to what our balance is, because I think we've been on the high side of that. So I think that it behooves us to invest that money and not just sit on it, but not for operating. This is all about capital needs.
And I think that discussion can be, again, something that we look at throughout planning for the next budget, as far as that kind of stuff goes. But so why don't we do this? Why don't we start with want to mention public services? So why don't we I've got a list of things to sort of hit on, just to look at, and we'll just sort of jump around. And if I miss anything, if anyone wants to go back and look at anything in detail, just stop me and we'll go back and go through it. But let's start with public services.
Joel, do we want to do that, or just start at the beginning and work our way down, and we know we didn't miss anything?
I think it's kind of what I've done just by looking at where we're at. I think unless anyone wants to go over anything with municipal budget, admin, operations.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much under control. I don't think
everything looked good there. So we'll just scroll down, and then I just want to make sure John doesn't pass out before we get done with this. So,
Juan is keeping an eye on me. We got this. Don't worry.
which one did you get?
Oh, Pfizer.
Pfizer. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting a different one.
Yeah.
So,
I got the Bud Light shot. I put Bud Light, tequila, and no, I'm just kidding.
You're all good. You're all good. It won't last long.
That's right.
Then
There you
you'll feel
go.
like Superman
Right.
with a mask.
With a mask on. That's right. Who is
That
that
doesn't
masked
go okay.
man? Yeah.
so jumping into public services.
Do you guys want me to bring it up on screen? Do you want to do that? Do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't know. The numbers are so small. It may be hard for people to see. My apologies, everybody at home. But we'll do our best. And anyway, I'm going to move you guys to, there we go. So do you want me to just kind of talk about the big ones? And then if there's anything else that stands out, does that work? Okay.
Yeah.
So as Wanda said, the biggest jump in this area is, in terms of dollars, is solid waste disposal, which is the transfer station. For those who aren't aware, we have a contract with Noblesboro and Jefferson to manage and manage our waste effectively. Every town in the state of Maine, by statute, is responsible for its own solid waste. And so thanks to that wonderful statute, which obviously happens for a reason, but we need to find a place for our solid waste to go. And so we contract with our good friends next door in Jefferson and Noblesboro, and they own the transfer station. So we have a contracted agreement with them. You can see that the budgets over the last 4 or 5 years have been relatively stable, somewhere around the mid 90s. This year it jumped from 94,000 to 111,000. So that's obviously our share. Damascotta also has a share of this as well. I think that we're ultimately, and this maybe seems unkind, but we're at the mercy of 2 other towns that are actually the ones who own the property, and they're the ones that vote on the budget. They set, how it goes. So when you go to their budget meetings, you sit and you watch the 2 towns figure out how the budget will work, even though we're putting in a pretty sizable chunk of change into the operation. I don't think 18% increases are sustainable over the long term. If that is a direction that they would want to go, it doesn't take too long before it makes sense for us to look at an alternative. Having said that, well, the level costs over a long time have kind of led us to, perhaps be unreasonably happy with, the cost and the operations. But certainly this is a wait. I guess I would view it with a wait and see approach. I think we don't get a lot of complaints, and there's a lot of people who are happy about the operation up there. But there are, alternatives that exist, whether it's, incinerating waste and turning it to energy, or different recycling options, or, collecting, composting or what have you. There are alternatives available out there. Are they less expensive? I don't know. Are they more environmentally conscious? I don't, yes. I should say yes, I do believe they are more environmentally conscious, but we're in the situation we're in. And if that's something that we would want to pursue, I think I don't know that this number is the canary in the coal mine, but I think it's something that bears watching. And that's really all I'd say on that.
So I'm just, I guess the question is the fees here are based on tipping fees, right? So it's basically the amount it costs the transfer facility to dispose of the waste that we leave at the transfer facility. Is that?
Well, they have a budget. So when they bill us calling it tipping fees.
Mm-hmm.
but realistically, it's not the tipping fees because it's the operation, it's the entire operation. So I think it's a misnomer, honestly. I mean, there's a contract that we have that covers its operations. The amount we pay 1/12, we pay 1/12 of that budgeted amount, through the year. So I don't view them as tipping fees. I view it as a contract. So, but of course, does the amount that we throw in there and then they have to dispose of then turn into effectively what our tipping fee is? I guess that's one way of looking at it, but I view it as you weigh what you have, you pay based on what you weigh, so at that moment, not mixed into the middle of salaries and benefits and electricity and things like that, which is we're paying our piece of that whole shoot and match. Yeah.
John, how does the formula work that shares it out between towns? Do we know?
I have the contract. I need to let me go back and look at the contract so I can tell you exactly I don't want to.
It's probably.
I remember, but I'm not 100% sure I know the number. So I'll send you a copy of it. It's pretty. I can look it up tonight if I have a moment. So. But I have to stop the share if I do that. So you guys, you'll have to look on your own. But yeah.
All right. And that's one that's, again, we can't really do too much about. So, but again, it's a good one to keep an eye on. And is there anything else on public services? Did you want to talk about the LCTV, Wanda?
Well, I just looking at it, I mean, I said 50%, but actually it doubled. So it's not a big amount of money, but I just wondered why it doubled in a year. And again, if that does that next year and then the next year and then the next year, I was just wondering why it went up that amount.
So,
do we know? I don't know.
Yeah, so more than a year ago, I should say, LCTV reorganized, and they met with the area town managers. Gee, I don't know, maybe in the fall. I can't remember exactly when we met with them, but effectively the word was, one, we're on shaky financial ground. We're going to try to rescue what we have through donations and the like, but we're going to need additional support from the towns to keep this thing afloat. And so we knew that this was coming in at some point. The exact amount we were not aware of, but the sense was that this was the amount that, there was larger amounts talked about because back up. Our every year we receive a cable franchise fee from Spectrum, Charter, whoever was the top name on it, and those right now I think we received, as of right now, thus far this year we received about 11,588, and of course we'll receive more through the remainder of the year. And so the idea was, well, the idea that we receive those is meant to offset our costs for offering cable services, and that includes local programming and the like. Now, there's another part of this, and that has nothing to do with their request, but they have been working with me here over the last few months to try to organize our new contract renegotiation so that we can gain more funding, because effectively we are not getting as much in our franchise fee as we are due by state law and by federal law. And so they have been working with us to try to do that. Now, that has nothing to do with whether or not they ask for more money or not. You can give them $5,000, you can give them $5. That doesn't matter. But in terms of the value added, I guess is the question, are they making themselves worthwhile to the community? So that's really the question, I think, for you guys. But in terms of where their number comes from, in part it's related to that franchise fee. And we receive somewhere in the neighborhood of $14,000 to $16,000 a year annually. And so the idea is, well, we wouldn't use all of that, but we feel that this is the level of service that we provide your community. So, but we can certainly invite Larry Seidler to come in and talk with us to really talk about what their plans are and where they plan to go from here. Because obviously this has been, they've been through quite a bit in the last year, but this is a pretty sizable increase. And so I don't think they'd have any trouble talking to you guys about where their plans are and where they're headed here in the next year or 5, I guess.
Yeah, I remember, was it last year or the year before that there was a decent increase, or there was a little bit of an increase. And again, we had the discussion, I guess it was 3 years ago, that it was that it didn't seem like enough back then, to again, a lot of these things, they run flat for a certain amount of time, and they might run flat for too long when their services like that. I mean, we had this similar thing that happened with Skedumfa, where our number went up there a few years back because of their costs going up and all that kind of stuff. So, but we could definitely look into it.
No, I mean, like I said, it's not, in the big scheme of things, it's not a big deal. It's just the percentage kind of catches your eye.
Yeah.
And I know through the whole COVID thing, I mean, Larry was at the hospital, I think every week he did updates on what was going on for the community service. I know Marva does some nice shows. I mean, they do some nice shows for the community and keeps everybody updated. So I'm not questioning what they do. I just looked at them. I think, almost 100% increase. I was just wondering why, why. So like I said, in the big scheme of things, that's not a ton of money. So.
Yeah. I think they're, like you were saying, Wanda, they're trying to, I think, make themselves more available to the community. I think we've seen that over the last time, that even apart from COVID, that was a plan, but obviously, like, everyone's plans changed. So I think that, I think they're really trying to, really work with us. In fact, almost one of the first people I emailed was Larry the decision to name the building after Clayton had kind of come to be, because there was a good chance he wasn't going to be able to be there. And so we were hoping to film something or make something available so he can see, what was happening. And that, of course, we didn't have time. But I think that the LCTV that, I've experienced in the last year in terms of as a town manager, the value added has been, multiple fold over, compared to last time, or last year at this time.
Yep. Anyone have anything else they wanted to go over in public services? Okay. So public safety. The one thing I wanted to, I'll open it up first. Does anyone have anything that they wanted to go over in this? It's all pretty close. The one thing I did want to bring up was the emergency medical services. That's the ambulance service. Is that correct, John?
Sorry, I lost my battery on my headphones. So, did you have a question for me?
Yeah. So emergency medical services. That's the ambulance service, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I did find the contract. I probably the best thing to do is probably in terms of the transfer station. I can send that to anybody if you want to look over what that stands for and what that means. But I think basically it's it's fair to say there isn't a funding formula. You just say this is the amount. But let me, I think it comes in part to all of the items that you receive in part of the contract in terms of the ability to dispose X, Y, and Z there. So it's probably better to, rather than to talk about the funding formula, than to probably read the contract itself to represent what exists.
Sounds good.
But anyway, I'm sorry. The other question you had, Joel, was about the emergency medical services.
Yeah. So that's what emergency medical services is the ambulance, correct?
That's exactly right. Yep.
So when Brian and I went to their meeting last fall, and we sort of reviewed their budget and everything else like that, it was a pretty tight budget. Again, because they were trying to be not sticker shock any of the towns and be as responsible as they could be. But one of our concerns was, especially where where our budget falls and their fiscal year runs, it might be good just to sort of check in, do a little bit of a check-in with them and just make sure they're still on the same path, because it's a lot easier to change that number up if their revenues haven't
increased. I know that was a big thing. Their revenues, which is car accidents and heart attacks and things like that, that's where they kind of make some of that money. We're down because of the pandemic, because people weren't doing as much. I don't know if that's all come back or where things are, but I know that budget is very tight. It didn't include raises for the those frontline workers who have been doing so much, and I just want to make sure that we recognize that number is a very it is not that much money for what we're getting out of it. It's 30,000. Our share is 30,000, 399. So it's for that we get an ambulance service in town. It's on call. They're there, whenever we need them. And so just in the future, I'm not saying that we necessarily raise it this year, but that number I believe is gonna go up as it should, as their expenses go up and their methods of revenue sort of change. So.
And Joel, just a little background. If you look back over the years, you can see that a couple of years ago, it really jumped. And what happened was their bread and butter was doing transports from like the hospital to skilled units and things like that. And not to like main med, but from an acute hospital to a lower level, which is a skilled unit. I mean, that was truly their bread and butter, and they got a lot of money for that. And insurance companies now will not pay for that. So that's really why there was such an increase a few years ago. They lost really their biggest revenue stream of their everyday commitment to people, because they can't get paid for any of that anymore, so they don't do it, or they do it rarely. So I mean, that took a huge profit margin away from them, and that's why we really see that we went from the 4,000 ranges up to 15 to 27, and because they were really hurting there for a long time when that all happened.
Yep. And just to give a little bit more background as to how it works. So there's 6 founding towns that were part of the creation of the ambulance service, and everyone pays a different amount based on population and population evaluation.
No, but just population, I think.
No, I'm sorry. It's not number of calls. No,
number of calls. That's right. Yep.
It's number of calls and valuation, I think. Or am I wrong?
No valuation. No,
Okay.
you're right. I think there's a 3-year call, but there's nothing. The thing is, there's nothing that it's way they come up with their budget, but there's no organizing document that says that's what it is.
Right.
It's what the board has felt like it needed to be, but there's no interlocal agreement that binds the 6 towns apart from the fact that there's an organizing document, but there isn't any sort of basically to Rob's question, what's the funding formula? Well, it's what the formula is with that group of directors, and so there was talks, and we had kind of started to work on what an interlocal agreement what might look like, but that got put on the shelf when everyone started wearing masks and started using hand sanitizer. So it needs to come back up though, because it's a consistently inconsistent thing, and I think there's a lot of good people involved, and Joel was active in part of that, and Brian, and Ellen McFarland is our rep on that board. Mark obviously has been a long time, somebody who's been involved with the CLC ambulance. I mean, we've got great people. Nick, Brian, there's really good people involved. It's really about the towns, I think, at this point, Joel. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think it's about the 6 of us really figuring our stuff out and really being able to figure out so they can manage themselves. And making sure then that we're getting quarterly reports back or yearly reports back that make sure that we know where those funds are being spent. Do you think that's fair to say, Joel?
That is, and I would just say that if this was and again, I'm not speaking for any other towns at all. I don't want anyone misconstruing what I'm saying. But if we did an equal split between all the towns to make up this difference that we're talking about with their budget, we would be in the $60,000 range for an ambulance service. So every town would pay $60,000, and that would still be an incredible deal for what we've got going. So I'm just saying, look at that number, think about it, and I would just like to reach out to Chief Bryant just to make sure that things are looking okay, because if it seems like they're going to have some shortfalls, I'd rather add some to that line now rather than having to have a special town meeting to fund it later. So anyway, just something to think about. But like I said, it's worth every penny. They do a lot of work for not much pay, and they do it because they're committed to it, and we have a lot of commitment, and we have some really great people. So that's my little shout out. But anyway, so there's that. Is there anything else that anyone saw they wanted to go over in those lines? All right. Moving along to the fun one, Public Works. This is up, the total is up 11.4% for everything. Is there anything anyone wanted to go over in particular?
I think I would like to get some clarification on it, because like
Okay.
under winter operations, it's got gravel, and that's over doubled. It goes from 10.5 to 22,000. And then down in the annual operating subtotals, none of those numbers make sense if you look from one side to the other. I mean, we go from 50,000 down to 13,000, 70,000 down to 29,000, 6,500 up to 14,000, 11,700 up to 136,000. I mean, it doesn't make sense that there would be that kind of difference. And there's no rhyme to reason as to what's down. I mean, materials are going to go from 11.5 to 136.5.
Yeah, it must have. I would assume it would have something to do with the projects that are planned for the year.
But the big projects that are planned for the year are under capital.
Correct, but there's some other stuff that's under that's
Yeah.
under some of that.
Do you want me to open this up? This is the
Yeah,
general
definitely.
contractor projects. Okay, so this is the breakdown of what's in that. Let me actually back up before I do that. So general contractor projects, which is this general contractor subtotal, which is 194,594. It includes 13,300 for labor, 29,900 for equipment, 14,800 for culverts, and then the 136,550 that Wanda was talking about for material. So when you jump over to general contractor projects, this is how that's broken out. So here's the 1330, the 29.9, the 136.5. The one thing you'll notice is not in here is the culverts. So the culverts, even though it's in that subtotal, that those culverts also include capital. That's just one place to put all the culverts in one spot. So it's kind of the exception to the rule, I suppose. But basically there's two large projects that are in this maintenance section, which is 1,000 feet of reclaim, base pave, and finished paving of Academy Hill. There's two spots that are next to the area that got repaired, somewhat near Timber Lane. And so it's 1,000 feet, 500 on either side of that. And that's a total, that whole project is 105,475. And then High Street, this is somewhat of an extension of work that was called for after the Academy Hill project, in that, it was everything else was done, and gee, this thing isn't part of the project but needs to be addressed. And so this is the reclaim, grade, and base pave of 625 feet of roadway, the replacement of the cross culvert. The cross culvert, if you go on High Street, basically when you pull on, there's a cross culvert which is within, I don't know, probably 50 feet of the intersection with Academy Hill. And so this is a replacement of that cross culvert. So that project totals 65,679. And then there's 8,600 put aside for storm allowance. So you can read, there's more detail in this here.
Yeah.
Academy Hill, High Street, and the storm allowance. And then the one thing that you guys had talked about, I had asked Seth to also put together. So he wrote this up. This isn't my language, this is his language. The other thing I asked him to put together was a list of some of the areas that he felt that were projects that needed attention in the, 5 to 10 range, but it could be this year, depending upon what the priorities of the board are. And so these, they range from 35,000 to 350,000. But these are all projects that, if we were to take one out, this is, a list of items that could be addressed, that are also considered as, high priorities from the road commissioner's perspective. So it gives you something, rather than each of you saying, well, I think it's this and I think it's that. Here's another list to draw from. If you said, I don't think High Street needs that work, for example, I'd rather see us spend that 65,000 and pay 10 more thousand, and do closed drainage on Hopkins Hill, for example. If that's, that's kind of the trade-off, if, in terms of priorities, that you guys are setting the priorities for this. And then you also could say we don't want to spend that much too, but you get my point. Like, it's just, the idea is just to really give you the tools to make some decisions, up or down, left or right.
Did that clarify some of that, Wanda?
It does.
I think
It does. I think my biggest concern is that, I truly, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I truly feel like we're not through COVID yet. I mean, Lincoln Academy has a potential huge outbreak going on right now. I mean, they have a lot of people, a lot of kids quarantined, teachers quarantined. It's still hitting our community hard. There's a lot going on. And when I look at this, and I know roads are important, and believe me, I get that. But when I look at this budget and I go back to 17, 18, every year this budget increases. And I know materials increase and all of that, but at some point, you know, I think it's okay to slow down a little bit, maybe do a little bit less. My other concern is that, you know, and I've said this before, you know, 2 years ago, we didn't have town meeting last year, but the year before that, you know, the selectmen stood up and said anything over $100,000 goes to bid. Doesn't mean that Seth won't get it. I think it just keeps everybody equal in the game. It allows other people to have it. And some of these projects really are adding up to a huge amount of money. I mean, Academy Hill, we just spent $2 million. We did another small section for how much? Now we're looking at doing another section for another, you know, well over 100,000. I mean, I know our roads need to be fixed and worked on, but it just seems like, you know, we're doing a reevaluation, which is going to hit some people hard. Plus, we're going to increase our budget, and it's going to hit. That's even going to hit them even harder. And I just think, you know, I just think we need to look really hard this year at what we can and we can't do, because we don't really know what this future is going to bring. And, you know, there's some people in Newcastle that are going to be having a hard time, I think, along with a lot of other people in other towns. But I'm just concerned. I'm concerned at what we're spending in not only this general budget, but also, you know, the maintenance budget and also the capital budget. It's a lot of money. It is a huge amount of money. So that's my take.
Does anyone have anything else? Any other thoughts?
I find these two, the general contractor subtotal breakdown and then capital budgets, roads budget. I'm just trying to decipher, you know, how does an item end up on one of these sheets and not on the other? You know, what's the criteria for that? And can these be combined, I guess, to, you know, to one, you know, sort of one spreadsheet? It makes sense to do that. John, can you explain that a little bit?
I could, but I don't think I'll like the answer to what I'll give you for an answer. I don't really know the answer to this. I mean, you can argue that what is a capital need and what is a maintenance need, right? I mean, fixing 2 sections of road that are 1,000 feet long. I mean, the amount, if you were just going by the amount, certainly $100,000 is a considerable amount. I mean, most auditors say, well, what's a capital need? Over $1,000, over $5,000? There isn't much we do that's less than that. So, you know, I think that there's, you know, an argument to be made as to whether or not, you know, you could put it under one. I guess what I thought about taking this out of that budget, putting everything in one spreadsheet and saying, this is everything. But then the question is, how much, you know, this part goes out of this budget, this part comes out of that budget. Because I think from listening to you guys, you know, the important part is trying to understand the budget, understand what are the projects we're trying to accomplish, what's the long-term cost of these projects, you know, what's the priorities, you know, why are we picking this versus that. It's less important as to which part of the budget it comes out of, I think. But having said that, you know, there's an understanding that there's going to be a time in a day when the arrangement that we currently have ends. And so and I've talked about this with Seth, and he says part of this is he wants to make sure that everyone understands how much is being spent in given areas, so that way you have an apples to apples if someone says, well, how much are you paying on, for labor on this, or how much are you paying for equipment time on that? So you can actually kind of, work those things out. When you go to capital, and I'm sorry if everyone's, mouse just kind of went crazy because I'm jumping over here. In large part, the work that's done is like a singular item. Like for example, the guardrails, $60,000, right? And the 20,000 is kind of working around that $60,000 guardrail. Stonebridge is, now it's the whole road, it's the whole thing. There's obviously it's the finish of that. West Old County, we already, that's been a capital project. That's how we've kind of determined those projects to be capital needs. So that's been sort of the dividing line, but you guys can draw the line wherever you want it to be. So if your sense is, geez, I'd rather just have everything in one area, we can do that. The one thing that I would just, in terms of, I guess, caution, is that the long term of being able to figure out how much we're paying late for labor on things lets us understand in part, if someday we had to hire somebody to do this, whether it's, we hire one person, like Damascotta has one person that's hired. They have a truck that they pay for, and they pay that person's wage, to do what have you, the road commissioner type duties. The labor is meant to try to give you a sense of, or at least in my mind, it gives me a sense of how much we're paying someone to do work on those roads. The other items, kind of in capital, are really much more of, this is something that's, we would put this out to bid. This isn't this isn't something one person would do. And you look at the number that's in this budget, a third of that number is storm damage, which predominantly what that one person that we would hire would be doing if that was the scenario. So it's solving a problem that was a problem for the prior board in part, but that's not this board. And so what you need to do, I think, is what works best for how the four of you, or the next five, whoever that is, whatever they need to understand how we're spending money. Is it being done efficiently? Are we getting the best bang for the buck? Whatever way that is the best way to do it. And so I think that's where, I think for the last board, that was an important piece. That may not be so for you guys.
Yeah, I'm just think, I guess,
I'll go back to
maybe it's just looking at it naively, and Seth would slap me in the head. But to me, it's all, if we have an existing road in this town, and we're going to do something to it, to me, that is maintenance. To me, it's all maintenance. I think to me, a capital investment or improvement would be creating a new road. If we wanted to connect East Old County Road to West Old County Road, and blaze a trail through the woods and create a new road there, to me that would be a capital investment, because we're, it's a significant investment. But to me, it's all just maintenance. And like I said, that might be a naive way to look at it, and Seth could maybe school me on that a little bit. But that's my only point. Is it's a little confusing to look at two charts and then trying to comprehend, how we're gonna manage this looking into the future. I think definitely we need a breakdown of labor. If we're going to continue on this, this model, which I think is good. To Wanda's point, I think my understanding of where we are now is we're trying to attack and make up some deferred maintenance, town infrastructure. And so the numbers are going to be higher. And I think that we talked about that with Seth when he met with us a few months ago, and he explained that. So I feel I feel okay with this model. And I think this is essential, is to have these breakouts like this. It's a little confusing, I think, still, to me, and, maybe I'll get a better understanding of it, but it's just, that's just a side point. The other point, I just want to put a note out in the air when we talk about paving the sand and salt lot, for $75,000. I think we should have a discussion about whether that's the best place for that lot, because to me it doesn't. I could dream of better places to put a municipal sand lot than the waterfront of precious resource like the Great Salt Lake. So that's my only point there. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and just to talk a little bit more about your question, Tor. When I was first on the board, again, we had a different model where we did have a public works department, and so a lot of that was broken up differently because a lot of that stuff was being taken care of by them, and there were still contractors that were doing whatever the public works department couldn't do as far as a culvert here, a culvert there, that kind of stuff. And then where we didn't have a contractor that we were working with, everything else went to, it was the projects that the road commissioner would, get figures for, or get bids for, and put together those projects. So I think that was kind of the difference. It never totally made sense to me either when it was broken up like that, because it was all roads, but we had capital roads, and we broke it up. So it is something that we could combine, but I think we should just see how that would work with. And again, they do kind of, our road projects have gotten just kind of bigger instead of just doing culverts, because that was part of the reason why we changed doing the way we were handling it, is we would literally just have a culvert replaced and do a little ditching, and it wouldn't necessarily be a part of an entire plan. And we've kind of shifted our when we started this new program, the idea was to look at the entirety of the project to try and bring our roads to a place of consistency and quality. So it is a little bit antiquated breaking it out the way we have with this current model, but again, it could change at some point. So I don't know.
I'd say, I think looking at this, it seems like the back on the Public Works tab, we've got winter operations, we've got annual operations, and then the general contractor kind of does belong with the capital. I mean, it's not part of our multi-year program, but it's the same kind of work. So I think actually that would make sense to have all that type of project in one portion of the budget. This absolutely, if we switched models to where we had a public works department, we're going to have to reorganize the budget. I don't think we can model a different kind of operation with our budget now, and I don't think that's really effective to sort of try to be a placeholder so we know what it's going to be, because that would be such a different way to operate. I think the way we're operating has been effective, but after this discussion, I think putting that general contractor portion in one budget with our multi-year capital programs, and whether we call them capital or maintenance, and that is kind of an arbitrary thing title, but I think they belong together. These other items, the winter operations, annual operations, those are very clearly much more on the maintenance side than the large scale construction or reconstruction. I think that would be a logical way to break it, rather than have some road projects here and some road projects in the capital. And then I think then we get at, you know, we haven't gotten there yet, but we put operating money in our roads capital reserve account for the capital projects. So, you know, it has an impact in our operating budget, whether it's in this spreadsheet or in our capital spreadsheet.
John, you got to start all over, is what Rob is saying.
Throw it all out. Throw it all out.
You got to start over. This whole budget's junk.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I would say is that it would be good to have a little bit of a conversation with the road commissioner, just to see if there was any reason why it should be set up that way. But I think this was basically kind of a holdover from the way we were doing things before. It's funny, you know, I never actually really saw the Public Works Department because it disappeared it disappeared like a month into my first thing. So it's always been weird. For 6 years, we've never really retooled how this is all gone. Because we didn't have a Public Works Department. We were finding random contractors to do all these bits and pieces, and it was like 6 different people, and you know, it was kind of chaos, the way it was run. So yeah, maybe it's time to retool it and reorganize it, but I don't know.
I would argue that that's not a huge change. I mean, it's just taking a couple lines out of this section and consolidating these types of expenses somewhere else. It means that our budget may or may not have the labor and equipment line and material line items, but I think we can address that other ways.
Yeah, I think that's what my point was, is, you know, not really changing the numbers, just sort of reorganizing it. And I think that's the clarity that I was kind of looking for. I also want to say, I think, you know, in my mind, when we talk about a Public Works Department, we're talking about a municipality owning equipment, having a staffer or staff, you know, that manage that equipment and do, you know, do work, a specific category of work. Anything beyond that, you know, becomes a design, bid, reward type model where you go out for bids and you do that. That's a completely different model than what we have now. And, you know, that's a discussion for, you know, somewhere else. But I think these changes are just managing the spreadsheet. I just want to be clear about that. That's all I'm asking.
And I think my biggest concern is the cost of all of this, in the sense that, you know, this is the first year we're paying for Lincoln Academy. And I think that's close to, you can correct me, John, but it's either 200,000 or 250,000 this year that we have to pay on that loan for this year. And then when I look at when I put both of these, just the road part together, we have increased the budget this year by over $200,000 for doing roads. And I just think that's a little excessive in the year. It's not like we haven't been doing a lot of projects, but every year it goes up, and this year it's gone up a walloping over $200,000. And I just think that's a lot. So, you know, I mean, we need to also hold the road commissioner in check as to, you know, it's nice to get all these roads done, but we certainly don't have to do them all this year or next year. I know we're on a fast track, but, you know, I think increasing the budget by well over $200,000 is way too much for 1 year. I mean, we're questioning other things that have gone up, you know, 10 or 15,000, and yet, you know, this one goes up over 200,000. And I think that needs some really looking at what we want to do this year and how much we really want to spend. So.
I think the danger of not doing projects is that they still need to be done. And if
I'm not saying not do them, Joel, but I don't know that we need to spend, I don't think we need to do all of these in 1 year at the sum of over $200,000. I think we can do some road work, and I think we need to. I don't think we should lose track of that. But do we need to go, the budget every year keeps going up and up and up. And I know things are increasing in price, but this is a massive amount of work for the town in a year. And I don't know that, you know, I don't know that we need to all do this in 1 year at that cost. That's my point.
Yeah, and my point was just that we, the less we get done, the further out the other roads are that need to be done. You know, there's a bunch out my way. There's Island Road is barely recognizable as a road. You know, there's a bunch of things, and so that's why we put the plan together. When we put it together, was to sort of set up a schedule of how to do it. And again, we weren't doing a lot of our road projects slowed down, have been slow for they've only picked up in the past 2 years. Let's just put it that way. For the first 4 years I was on the board, our road projects kind of ground to a halt because of the you know, the change in, we had 2 changes in those 4 years in how we dealt with our roads. And so this is sort of an unfortunate catch up, but a catch up that I don't think we can ignore, and especially with the understanding that, you know, costs are going up, and so money that we don't spend this year, we're going to be spending. It's going to cost people more money next year to do if we end up doing more work. So that would be my argument for staying on the track that we're on, especially where our budget is pretty good right now overall. So that's just my thought.
I just want to make sure I'm on the same page here with Wanda's number. The overall public works budget's up $72,000, $72,305 this year. So that's 11.14%. That includes the improvements to the Academy Hill High Street changes. Is that right, John?
Yeah, that 72 does.
So
yeah,
that's in the aggregate of the 11% increase. The debt service, which is what is the big driver of, you know, basically the increase this year in our overall budget, is 243,000 or 204,000. So that's you know, that's a big number. But that is, I mean, that was, granted, we're paying for that now over the next 10 years, but that was decided and voted on. So I'm just trying to keep those things separate. Maybe that's the difference between the way Wanda's looking at it and me. But so the other in that 11% increase, that also includes you know, all the other sand, the annual, sanding, salt, all that sort of, standard maintenance. So,
And our new contract for plowing.
And one thing I would add, I don't want to lose the momentum we have on our roads program. The only hesitation I have is that I know that many construction materials have been spiking in price, and that we hope is not a permanent state of affairs. I don't know if road construction materials are seeing that same type of price change. If there was reason to believe that the current pricing was a bubble that was going to subside, that could be an argument for holding off on some projects this year. I don't have a reason to believe that is the case, but if that was, I would say we might want to slow down a little bit this year, then accelerate. But unless we have reason to believe that the prices are temporary, as Joel said, all we're seeing is costs go up. So, projects we don't get done this year, we know are going to be more expensive in the future. So unless there's reason that that's not true this year because of the unusual activity, I don't want to lose our momentum.
yeah, I think the variable in that is what happens with, if there's an infrastructure bill, something like that happens, who knows? That could change the landscape too. Because I think that has bigger implication on, big picture as a state. And I think, Seth might agree to this, that it's the big players in the state, like the Crooker construction people that are driving the cost of materials when there's big projects going on and the price of material goes up, and then the little people have to implement and follow suit. So, those are some market variables that I'm not saying I'm predicting. I'm just saying there's a lot to it. So it's hard to hold that crystal ball. What you're looking at.
I think the one thing that's going to definitely go up next year and for the next few years, that we're not going to be able to hold back, and this is why I don't want to necessarily slow down now, is labor. Labor is going to be the biggest driving cost, more than materials. That's what I'm seeing. There's a shortage of it. There's everyone's looking for work right now. There are expenses that are going up, so cost of living increases are something that's going to happen. So I would say, you can only do so much. You're always gonna get it, but it's not gonna, if our roads where they'll be in 5-10 years at this pace, it's a different story. But like I said, there's roads all over town that are completely falling apart, and if we don't keep working on this, we're going to be in the same position. So that's my thought.
Let me ask a procedural question here. I know you guys are in the midst of this, but I as I'm doing this, I'm kind of thinking in my brain. For your next meeting, I would like to take and populate the selectmen's column, and not because I believe that you voted on it necessarily, but it's easier for working in that column to make changes. So what I'm asking of you, just as kind of something else to talk about maybe right now, unless you want to continue down this road, is I'd like to populate that next column with everything except, if there's a change. It sounds like universally you guys all kind of agree with the idea of moving everything to one, or moving those, sorry, Charlie horse. I got moving everything to one, all those large projects to one thing. Is that right? Is that kind of unanimity? Is there unanimity behind that? And then working within that to figure out if, what projects you want to do, or size or scope.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that.
I think it'll make it clear. It'll make it easier to see because it'll all be in one place,
Okay.
So.
What is that? Is that what you thinking? You'd like to have it all in one place too?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to flip pages here and it gets very confusing.
Okay. Because what I can do is I can work towards putting it all together. Still have Seth come in. He's got something else going on tonight. I'd like to invite him, to have a chance to chat with you guys about this idea. I can very easily populate that next column, but move those items out. But the reason why I want to do that is the formulas and the rest of it all need to kind of work with that column. So if we make changes like on the fly in the middle of a meeting next time, we can see real time what those changes are, how they impact everything. So it's not that necessarily, oh, you totally agree, and this is, we're going to spend, whatever. It's more just to, sorry, it's back. Just to make it easier when we're working in that column next time.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So are we good for now for this? Do we want to keep discussing roads, or put that all in one place and take a look at it next time?
Yeah, I think that.
Okay, good. So yeah, and so then in reserves, we've got the municipal building reserve that we talked about. There's 75,000 in that John put in. So everyone saw that. That was something we kind of discussed. Everyone's good with that one.
My understanding of that, Joel, is basically setting aside some money for improvements that we have to make to buildings in the future.
Correct.
In the near future.
Correct.
So in my mind, it's rather than paying things with a credit card, we're paying it with a debit card.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, definitely.
So in that regard, in terms of the funding, I just want to understand this. So if I move this column over and we put everything together, what we would do is take those projects, they would be capital projects then. Is that what I'm understanding? So there'd be a shift. Yeah.
The contractor public works, general contractor projects.
Yes.
Those things would go in the same list with our multi-year capital program project.
Right.
But maybe a separate heading that these projects, are part of the multi-year capital roads program. These are additional roads projects.
So in terms of which category they're funded out of, do we want to have them funded separately, one through the maintenance line, the maintenance budget, and one through the reserve, or do we want them all funded through the reserve? And you don't need to have that answer necessarily tonight. You may want to think about that, but
my first reaction would be, say, put it all capital, call it the same, because it's the same kind of project. One is part of the some of it's part of the multi-year program. Others are, other capital projects that need to get done, but outside of that multi-year program. That's the way I see it, at least.
I think I think it's semantics. I think if it's, in whether you call it capital roads projects or, I mean, I know there's budgetary considerations for that, but as long as they're categorized all in the same place, that's my, I think that's what would be clear. So yeah.
Yeah, for my, so in terms of in terms of how it's handled, but in terms of the budget, you're absolutely right, Tor. There's a consideration here in that if it's not completed, if it's a reserve, it rolls over. And so that's why it's, in terms of priorities, yeah, it makes sense. I understand putting it in one place. The funding source is what's crucial here. And again, you don't need to make this decision tonight. I'm just trying to understand how to make it look that's closest to, maybe if you have a unanimous decision tonight, I can make it look that way next time, to say, so that you can all say, no, that's terrible, John. What are you doing? We can make that change, change back. So
let's put it this way. I think, going back up to the Public Works spreadsheet, items 24 through 27, annual operations subtotal. The question is, are those capital projects, or are those, are we considering those routine maintenance? That's what you're getting at, John?
Yeah, I mean, yes, because I think that if I think you can make a case that both of those could be capital projects. The two large ones could easily be considered capital projects. I mean, obviously, I think it's a little different with the storm money, and I think I would probably leave that in that budget.
I agree.
Yeah. So if I move those other two projects over to the capital project list, then I add the new total. The new total will be, I don't know, more than 550 and 580. Right. So I get what I'm prompting you for is, there's going to be a pretty big shift in the budget from out of roads. Effectively, roads or public works would look like the budget had gone down, and there'll be a corresponding increase in reserves.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, let's say the High Street project is budgeted at 65,000, but it gets completed for 50,000. Mm-hmm. I think it's totally reasonable that extra 15,000 then sits in the road reserves, rather than go back into the general fund balance. Right. I think that's appropriate and fine.
I think also it cleans up the public works category overall spreadsheet, because you won't have that swanky. What Wanda started with was talking about, how the history of these figures are kind of wonky. So we're talking about it from a different perspective than, something that's, it's got, more consistent increase or decrease. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, and if the money just sits there because it rolls over, then if a project didn't get totally completed, the money's still there for the next year when we can complete it.
Yep.
So it's kind of twofold. It's like Rob said, if you don't spend it all, it's still, you got extra. But if you don't get the work done, the money still sits there without being voted on again.
Right.
To complete it the next summer.
North Newcastle Road is a great example of that, right? That was one that didn't get done, but we were able to hold it over because it was reserve money. So when we did have it, we were able to, it simplified the process, as opposed to, things get weird sometimes. So, okay, that's very helpful, everybody. Thank you. And hopefully I won't have another attack here on my, oh boy. Anyway, so
you're not drinking enough.
That's what it is.
We've been sitting a long time.
I'm going on vacation. I'll be drinking plenty. No, I'm just kidding. That's
no, I'm talking water.
I don't think that's what you're talking about.
Water will help those challengers.
Do you want to borrow one of these Yetis for your vacation?
He hasn't picked it up yet, right? No, that sounds good. So I'll make that change, and I'll try to populate all those fields for your next budget, your next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. And then moving on, we've got debt service, which we've kind of touched on a little bit. We've got the new Academy Hill line, which is that, and then other than that, we just have the fire truck. It's remaining on the fire truck. So I don't think we got to go 2027. Okay, so that matures in 2027.
So let me just, I got a newbie question for John.
Yeah.
Is it typical in municipalities to bond so aggressively for 10 years on a public works project like this, capital project?
So for example, Academy Hill.
Yeah, no, like why, yeah, I get it, it's roads, it depreciates fast, so you want
Right.
to, you don't want to be paying a loan when something's obsolete or broken.
Right.
So I get that. Is 10 years reasonable, or is 20 years? Just
Well,
thinking ahead, is
yeah,
it?
as you said, it's the obsolescence of what you're doing, and certainly that road. The reason for the 10-year on that, and we looked at an 8-year as well. The thought is that there's going to be another major road project at some point in the near future that could take the place of this. And when I say near future, I'm talking about a decade.
Got it, yeah.
And so there's, you looked at that list that Seth laid out in his spreadsheet there. One thing to look at is, probably the Glidden Street neighborhood is one that needs to be kept an eye on, and that's largely because of the structured drainage that's in that neck of the woods. Cross Street and Pump Street are, until we shimmed over them and put a little overlay over them, they were basically cow paths. So there's some real concern in that area. But the idea here was really to try to get that paid off, so that way we were only maintaining that would be replaced by another payment.
Yeah.
After that. But I mean, really, comparatively to a lot of towns, we borrow very, very rarely.
Yeah.
And given the interest rates, and that was really one of the primary drivers of doing the Academy Hill bigger than what we initially discussed, is that the interest rates were so low that now is a time to really try to get as much done as we could on a borrowing. If we had to borrow, the time was right. So one could argue we should be borrowing more and doing more. That maybe not so now, given the fact that, the costs being what you guys were talking about, but it's worth discussing. The other thing I'd also note is, if you notice the rate on the fire truck of 4.19%, we did meet with Bangor Savings last month to talk about our relationship with them. And a number of things are going to change. I would expect that our rate of interest on checking is going to probably evaporate, but in turn, they're going to also look at all of our conversations with them, and including this loan payment at a 4.19% rate, when we're paying half that amount on Academy Hill. So we're gonna look at that here in the year to come. So don't despair at seeing that situation. It's only for another 5 years, so we're nearing the end of that, and I should get another quoted payoff amount for that fire truck. But you can do the math pretty quickly that we're still in the 100,000 range for that truck.
Yeah. Anything else on debt services anyone wants to go over? All right, moving on. We got our county tax, which is up just a little bit. It's not that much, 1.37%. It is a big number, but it hasn't gone up that much. Education, we just went over that. Anyone want to go over education again? No?
Nope.
Yep, and we have the reserves. So our reserve line will change with the capital road projects.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to mention here is obviously we talked about the building reserve. That was the money for the, you know, the buildings. I also want to make note of the fringe benefit reserve. This is our way to start to build the reserve account for the use of these fringe benefits, effectively EBT. And so when you have a long-standing, you know, employee comes and they cash out their, you know, EBT, whether they leave or whatever the reason is, that money comes out of their salary line. So what ends up happening is it kind of throws that part of the budget kind of out of whack, and when really it should kind of be its own thing, you know, separately. It's still administrative and it's still a fringe benefit and all that, but much like a lot of these reserves, there's a lot of ties to other parts of the budget. So I'm starting with this amount here, and the idea is that there's an amount that is the maximum exposure that we have for all fringe benefits. If everyone in the town office had the maximum hours that they could possibly hold and cash them out all at the same time, everyone was retired with 400 hours, what would we have to lay out, basically? And the idea is to build that reserve over time, so that way we have a substantial amount of money we could use and it doesn't throw other parts of our budget off. So $12,000 is not an insignificant amount of money, but if we build that up, then at least it protects us when that time comes.
What does that kind of build up to, John, to be at that point?
I believe the number, well, I did the numbers before I changed the fire department. So I want to say that it was over 40,000.
Okay.
If everybody maxed out and everyone was, if everyone was, and that's, of course, that amount changes every year as everyone's salaries change and so forth. But it doesn't account for different accrual rates. Because the idea is if you max out and at the 400 level, that's as high as you're ever going to be able to go anyway. So I could see this fringe benefit reserve, even if we maxed out in the possible amount and no one used any EBT over that year, we still would have to increase it because every year is just it grows. So yeah.
So John, just a thought, is this something we could also use if, say I work for the town and I don't take benefits because I don't take insurance because Roger has insurance, but then I leave and somebody comes in and wants insurance. So, and at $11,000 a year or whatever that number was, something like that, would this be an account that could be used for something like that too? Because we didn't really budget that for the year. Or is that different? Is this just for the earned time?
That's a good question. I think it would only be for the earned time, but
Okay.
but I think we could, if it's a fringe benefit. I would probably caution to do that rarely, but it's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of using it that way. I thought of it more of just kind of up and down, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. That's a good thought, Wanda.
Not that it happens that often, but once in a while you have somebody who doesn't need to take the insurance. Like we've had a couple people, but now, chances are the next person that comes into that role will probably want the insurance package. So
right.
Potential.
Okay. Nothing else on reserves. And let's finish with the revenue, John.
This is positive. Everyone loves revenue.
This
right?
is when you want this number to be up, be a plus, not a minus.
Well, you want it to be a positive at the end.
Yeah.
Now it's like, well, don't go too crazy, but yeah. So this is somewhat conservative, just because I'm not sure what a COVID world means right now, but basically, and I also don't know what 12 months of numbers look like in 21 or the end of 20, because we didn't have, our year end numbers for last year. That 362,000 for excise is not a real number, because you can see we're already at 427. I would argue at least $40,000 of this should be going to this number here, and arguably more if you look at the trend over the past few years. So I was very conservative with this number. You guys could argue with me and say, well, that number should be twice, should be 450. I wouldn't really argue with you, probably, because you can see the trend line is certainly in that kind of realm. But again, I'm trying to be more cautious in this budget in terms of revenues. And next year, I anticipate that our revenue sharing number is going to be up over what we anticipate here of 140,000. There were estimates that the number could be up to 225,000. So that's a huge increase. It's a huge difference from what I'm guessing. But I'm just trying to be cautious here. We budgeted, 90,000, which was the same amount that we had budgeted the year before. And we've already collected 136. But that was, again, a year ago when we weren't sure what receipts would look like. So the budget did pass the legislature. So we kind of know what the percentage rate will be, but it's largely dependent upon what their collections will be. So we could go up on this number if you wanted to be, again, a little bit more bold than I've been. And then the only other number I think or two numbers, one is interest checking. That number has really fallen off the map for us, as you can see in 21, and who could blame them? But the use of fund balance is the other key number here, which is the level from last year. I have a handy dandy little chart that I usually use here every year, and I say, okay, well, this amount of this and that and the other, and then we have this much available, and isn't it great? But this thing that I do and this formula that I have plugged in is frankly useless right now. So ignore it until we have some good numbers, and then I think it's of value to you guys. But at this point, there's really 3 numbers or 4 numbers that are of value in this revenue area. The most important thing here is the bottom line, which is the 1.36, which is up, $40,000 over last year. Arguably, it could be a little bit higher, but again, I'm just reticent to do too much more than a modest increase over last year's budget until we kind of know we're out of the woods. I'd rather be under estimating our revenues and be to the good on that than I would, overestimate our budget and then have to fix that issue, later on. So this is where my conservative streak comes out, I suppose, is in the revenue side.
John, I got a question on pandemic response funds.
Oh yeah.
I suppose you haven't, you don't have those. We haven't been awarded those funds yet, so
nope.
You can't put it in this budget. Where are we going to create a line item in revenue for that? Is that mentioned?
We've got it. So I think they're still working on the rulemaking on this. I had a great chat with Julie Kaiser from Waldeboro. She's the manager over there, and I asked, how she was doing it, and she's like, "Oh, there's a lot of issues," and because she went through something she was trying to apply for, and there's a couple different areas where we can use those funds. Obviously, the work that we did last year on the town office, the heat pumps, all that could be applied towards those COVID funds. So that's in terms of use of it. It has to be kind of applied for because of the use of what it's an approved use. The other key one that we have is that we budgeted $385,000 for excise tax, and we only received, or I'm sorry, we budgeted 362, and we should have received, more than that amount. I don't have the budgeted 20 numbers here in front of me, but we should have received, basically it was about $60,000 shortage. I think we were supposed to receive about 420. So we can apply that 420, that differential between the 420 and the 362 as a lost revenue for us.
Yeah.
And so our maximum amount that over the 2 years that we can apply for is 180,000. So there's a third of it right there. We take the work that we did on the town office due to COVID. There's a good, we're a good part of the way towards that 180. The first disbursement, I believe, is in June of this year, and then at some point, then next calendar year is the second one. But I still haven't gotten a lot of guidance on how we're gonna put our hands on those funds or how they're going to be distributed to the states and then to the towns. But we'll create it. Yeah, you're right. We'll create a line item to cover that. Then the question is, from the auditor's side, how are we applying those funds to those budget lines? But that's a question I need Michelle and Fred Brewer to kind of put their brains together on and figure out what makes the most sense in Trio.
Okay. Any other, so we're at the end of our budget. Is there anything that anyone wanted to go back over, touch on again? Questions for John to look into other than what we've discussed?
My only question is that we talked about engaging the finance committee.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we want to do that, and what does that interaction look like?
So I emailed the three members of our robust finance committee just after I sent you all a copy of the budget. So they all have a copy of the budget. I urged all of them to watch tonight. So hi, finance committee. Thanks for watching. And then what the conversation that we had at some point was to invite them at some point to be part of a meeting with you all. And so I left that somewhat undetermined. And I think you're right. This is the time to talk about what that means. I said potentially, the board's next meeting on the 26th, but I didn't commit to a time and date and all that. But in terms of the information they have, that's what they know.
I think that sounds good to.
Now, when do we refresh my memory when we need to be approving them?
A week from the 26th.
Okay.
I mean,
so that,
yeah.
But that does give us an opportunity to get some substantive discussion. If there are any changes that need to be made, we have that week to make them. I think that's reasonable. I guess it doesn't sound like we need to accelerate that earlier.
I don't think we need to meet this week.
Yeah.
And you're on vacation anyway, right, John?
I am. Yes, I'll be away beginning Friday and then through that following week. But I'll be back for your next meeting on the 26th. And I'll have email and I'll have my, not going to talk on the phone, but I'll have my email available. So if anybody has questions and Michelle will be back that week as well. So we'll be able to move this along somewhat outside of the meeting. I guess the questions are how much do you need in terms of that consult? Certainly the finance committee is coming in somewhat cold to this, although until tonight you guys were coming in cold to this. So clearly we can come to you were able to come to up to speed fairly quickly, I think, on where you are. But
good.
Yeah.
Do we want to meet again at 6 on 26th?
No.
No. Do you want to stay till 11?
No.
I mean, it's one
That's
of
my
the.
option. I'll take 6.
I mean, does that sound good? Just in case it goes on for a little bit, because we still, well,
Well,
yeah,
can we keep the rest of the agenda more lean? I mean, we had a bunch of, I mean, it took us a while to get to starting on the budget tonight, so.
well, what I was gonna say is if we started at 6, we could go through our agenda, whatever agenda items we needed, and then do the get the
So-
finance committee in and work through all that stuff. And then if we get through it quickly, we get out of school early.
So Jim is due to come back to talk numbers, individual numbers, and plug in mill rates potentially next time. So
Whoa.
tax impact of what this is.
So on the 26th.
26th.
Huh?
So there's that. And then the only other thing that's kind of on the horizon is CMP wants to come back and talk to you all about the bridge and repair of the tower. They originally wanted to come tonight, but I pushed them off tonight to the at least to the 26th. But if you guys feel like you need more time on the 26th, I can push them again, another 2 weeks.
Let's just see how it plays out. See what else comes in.
Okay.
I think we should just focus on the budget. So
All right.
I
Why don't
think we offer 2 more.
I'll push them anyway.
yeah.
Yeah, that's way better.
I mean, if you get through the 26th, then you feel like, oh, we'll have a quick, short meeting. Maybe you want them to come on the, whatever it is, the 3rd.
If we're widening discussion to more people, it's not gonna be fast.
Yeah.
And I would also this is a good point. We're talking about future agendas. I talked with Peter today. He has a letter that he'll have to you all tomorrow, I believe, about his investigation on the town's options related to marijuana regulation. So
Okay.
I think he said 9 pages. So be ready to sit down for a moment to read it. So
We can, we don't have to, are you saying to review that on the 26th?
No,
No.
I was just saying this has been delayed a bit, and we were really we had originally talked about doing something a little bit sooner to talk about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem likely that you'll have time on the 26th, I think, to talk about it. But in terms of things that are kind of on the horizon, I just wanted you to be aware, where that fits in. And when you get an email tomorrow from Peter, don't expect that means you have to talk about it on Monday the 26th.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Our next meeting will be on the 26th. We'll continue all this fun again. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Wanda, do I have a second? Rob, all in favor? Hey, have a good vacation, John.
Thanks, guys. Great
Thanks.
job.
Okay.